You think 1970s dinners were all casseroles and TV trays? Think again. That decade gave us Christmas feasts so memorable they deserve a place at every holiday table today. Let's dig into 3 hours of 100 Christmas dinners from the 70s that are too good to forget. Mincemeat tarts were the tiny treasures of holiday baking, rich with spice and memory. Each one held a spoonful of sweet, boozy fruit filling, apples, raisins, currants, and a splash of brandy, wrapped in a delicate pastry shell. The scent alone could make a house feel festive, filling every room with warmth and nostalgia. Mincemeat came from old British tradition, but American cooks made it their own, often skipping the actual meat and leaning into spice and sweetness instead. These tarts were made in batches, cooled on windowsills and packed into tins as gifts for friends and neighbors. They were a sign of generosity, of effort, of care taken in every fold of the dough. Few people make them now, maybe because they take time or because modern taste leans simpler. But in every bite of those old tarts was a story, a link to Christmases when home felt smaller but love felt bigger. Cranberry upside-down cake was one of those forgotten Christmas desserts that once appeared in early Betty Crocker cookbooks as a bright jewel-toned centerpiece. It began with a layer of cranberry sprinkled with sugar in the bottom of a cake pan, their tartness softening as the heat transformed them into a glossy red topping. Over this, she poured a light vanilla batter that baked into a soft golden layer, absorbing just enough cranberry juice to tint the edges. When the cake was flipped onto a platter, the cranberries glistened like holiday ornaments, creating a dessert that felt both simple and dramatic. Families served it warm with whipped cream, melting slowly down the sides, a contrast of tart berries and sweet cake that captured the spirit of winter gatherings. It carried the charm of recipes made from pantry staples rather than store-bought shortcuts, and it celebrated cranberries in a way modern holiday menus rarely revisit. This cake disappeared quietly as tastes changed, and as gelatin molds and chocolate desserts grew more popular, but older cookbooks still hold the memory of its red shimmer. Grandparents remembered it as a dessert that looked impressive without costing much, perfect for holiday tables when creativity mattered just as much as flavor. Today it remains a nostalgic reminder of the early Betty Crocker era when home bakers trusted their pans, their instincts, and the seasonal ingredients waiting in their cabinets. It was a dish that reflected warmth, care, and a little holiday magic in every slice. Wild turkey roasted with chestnut dressing was Christmas dinner that required hunting success and forest knowledge. These weren't farm turkeys, but wild birds shot in December woods, their meat darker and more flavorful than domestic fowl. The turkey was stuffed with dressing made from dried cornbread, wild chestnuts gathered in fall, sage, and onions. Roasted slowly, the bird developed crispy skin while staying moist inside, the chestnut dressing absorbing juices and becoming rich and savory. In mountain communities, wild turkey represented Christmas success. The hunter who brought one home provided real celebration. The meat was lean and slightly gamey, requiring careful cooking to stay tender. Chestnuts added sweetness and texture impossible with modern ingredients. This was Christmas earned through December mornings in cold woods, through knowing turkey habits and shooting straight. The finished bird fed extended family, its presence on the table marking genuine achievement. Tomato aspic was the elegant mold that separated sophisticated hostesses from casual cooks, its shimmering clarity announcing refinement on any holiday table. Tomato juice was combined with unflavored gelatin, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and careful seasoning, then poured into decorative molds to set. The result was a quivering ruby ring that held its shape when unmolded onto beds of crisp lettuce. Some versions included chopped celery, olives, or shrimp suspended within like jewels in amber. The taste was intensely savory, nothing like sweet fruit gelatins that dominated other parts of the meal. Aspic required confidence, as unmolding could go wrong if the gelatin hadn't set properly. Successful unmolding brought genuine pride, the mold releasing perfectly onto its serving platter with a satisfying wobble. Tomato aspic represented formal entertaining from an earlier era, when certain dishes signaled social knowledge. Its disappearance marked changing tastes that favor simplicity over structured elegance. Pfeffernüsse were the spiced German cookies that appeared in Christmas tins across America, tiny rounds coated in powdered sugar that packed intense flavor into each bite. The name meant pepper nuts, though pepper was just one of many spices. Anise, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, and nutmeg combined to create cookies tasting like Christmas itself. The dough was stiff and dark with molasses, requiring muscle to mix and patience to roll into small balls. After baking, the cookies were hard, meant to soften over several days as they absorbed moisture. Traditional recipes called for aging cookies in tins for weeks, letting flavors meld. The powdered sugar coating added sweetness and made each cookie look like a tiny snowball. German immigrant families brought Pfeffernüsse recipes to America, where they became holiday traditions in communities across the Midwest. Church bake sales featured them. Grandmothers made them by the hundreds. The cookies were meant for sharing, arriving in tins as gifts between neighbors. Hoppin' John carried good luck wishes into Christmas dinner across the South, the combination of black-eyed peas and rice symbolizing coins and prosperity for the coming year. The dish cost almost nothing to prepare. Dried peas soaked overnight, rice bought in bulk, and whatever pork scraps the kitchen held. A ham hock or piece of fatback simmered with the peas, infusing them with smoky richness while the rice cooked separately. The two were combined on plates, the peas spooned over fluffy rice and topped with cooking liquid that had become thick and flavorful. Families ate Hoppin' John believing it would bring fortune, the superstition adding meaning to a meal that poverty might otherwise have made shameful. Children were taught to eat every pea on their plate to ensure the luck would stick. Hoppin' John represented hope dressed as dinner, the belief that better times lay ahead even when the present offered only beans and rice. Creamed onions were the pearly white side dish that appeared in silver serving bowls at Christmas dinners across America, their mild sweetness balanced by rich bechamel. Small pearl onions were peeled by hand, a tedious job that left cooks weeping but yielded incomparable results. The onions were simmered until just tender, then folded into a sauce of butter, flour, cream, and sometimes a touch of nutmeg that coated each pearl in velvety richness. The finished dish looked almost like a dessert, the pale onions glistening in their creamy bath. Families passed the bowl around the table, spooning modest portions alongside roast beef or turkey. The flavor was subtle, the onions sweet and soft against the rich sauce. Making creamed onions from scratch required patience and skill, the sauce needing constant attention to prevent lumps. By the 1980s, frozen pearl onions and canned cream soups had replaced the handmade version, and eventually the dish vanished entirely from most Christmas tables. Aspic molds were the savory gelatin creations that showcased ingredients suspended in shimmering jewel-toned towers of concentrated flavor. Clarified consommé or tomato juice was combined with gelatin, then poured over carefully arranged vegetables, hard-boiled eggs, or shrimp before chilling until firm. The presentation was everything. Unmolded aspics revealed their contents like treasures in amber, the vegetables and proteins visible through the transparent or translucent gel. Making aspic required understanding gelatin chemistry and having the patience to layer ingredients properly. The texture was unusual, the savory gelatin coating the tongue before releasing its flavors. Families served aspic as a first course or side dish, its impressive appearance justifying the effort. By the 1980s, aspic had become punchline shorthand for outdated cooking. Yet for decades it represented culinary ambition and skill. Aspic has completely disappeared from home cooking, remembered only in vintage cookbooks and mid-century nostalgia. Fried mush appeared on Christmas morning tables when the budget allowed nothing fancier. The humble cornmeal transformed through a 2-day process into something crispy and satisfying. The day before, cornmeal was cooked into thick porridge, then poured into loaf pans and chilled until firm enough to slice. Christmas morning, the slices were fried in bacon fat or lard until golden and crispy on both sides, then served with molasses, syrup, or whatever sweetener the pantry held. The contrast between crispy exterior and creamy interior made each bite interesting, and the corn flavor was comforting and familiar. Fried mush required almost no expense. Cornmeal was the cheapest grain, and the cooking fat came from previous meals. The dish represented the ingenuity of poor cooks who knew that texture and technique could elevate even the most basic ingredients into something worth serving on Christmas morning. Sugar plums were the Christmas confection that inspired visions in children's dreams, though few modern people know what they actually were. These weren't plums at all, but small round candies made by coating nuts or seeds in layer after layer of hard sugar syrup, a process taking days of patient work. The center might be an almond, caraway seed, or cardamom pod, surrounded by a hard candy shell that cracked between teeth to reveal the aromatic core. Making sugar plums required a special pan that rocked candies gently while syrup was drizzled over them, building up coats gradually. Each layer had to dry before the next was added. The finished candies were stored in tins and brought out only at Christmas, their jewel-like appearance making them decorative and delicious. The tradition dated back centuries to when sugar itself was precious. Sugar plums represented patience and willingness to spend days creating something fleeting and beautiful. Butter beans with ham hocks brought Southern comfort to Christmas tables, their creamy texture and smoky depth satisfying appetites like few vegetables could. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with a meaty ham hock until both beans and meat surrendered to tenderness. The cooking liquid reduced into a rich pot liquor that coated every bean with silky, porky goodness. Some cooks added onion, bay leaves, or a pinch of sugar to balance flavors, though purists let the ham and beans speak for themselves. The dish required time more than skill. Long, slow cooking was the only secret. Served in deep bowls with cornbread for soaking up the liquor, butter beans with ham hocks could anchor a meal or accompany the main roast. Grandmothers in the South passed down their timing instincts, knowing exactly when beans reached that perfect creamy yet whole texture. The dish connected Christmas to everyday survival cooking, reminding families that humble ingredients prepared with care could grace any occasion. Cured venison shoulder with red-eye gravy was Christmas dinner showing how preservation created celebration. The venison shoulder was cured in salt through late fall, transforming fresh meat into something that would last through winter. By Christmas, the shoulder had developed concentrated flavor, salty, slightly funky, intensely meaty. It was soaked to remove excess salt, then slow roasted until tender. The pan drippings were deglazed with strong black coffee, creating red-eye gravy, dark, slightly bitter, deeply savory. In mountain communities, cured venison meant Christmas protein that cost nothing but hunting skill and preservation knowledge. The meat was lean and dense, each slice packed with flavor that fresh venison couldn't match. Served with biscuits and greens, this was mountain fine dining earned through November hunts and December patience. The red-eye gravy cut through richness while adding complexity, proving simple techniques created profound results. Snowball frosting cake was the fluffy white coconut-covered Christmas dessert that looked like a mound of fresh snow glowing under holiday lights. Betty Crocker promoted this cake throughout the 1950s as the perfect winter showpiece thanks to its cloud-soft frosting and blanket of shredded coconut. The cake layers were baked light and tender, then frosted generously with boiled icing or fluffy white frosting before being coated on all sides. When finished, it resembled a snow-covered hill, making it a magical centerpiece for children and adults alike. Its flavor was simple, sweet, and comforting, and its appearance made it unforgettable at winter gatherings. Grandparents loved serving it because it looked dramatic, without requiring expensive ingredients, and it held its shape well on long holiday tables, warmed by laughter and soft lights. Every slice felt like a small celebration wrapped in white. Pineapple upside-down cake was the 1950s Christmas showpiece, bold, buttery, and unapologetically glamorous. Housewives lined pans with pineapple rings, placed a single cherry in each golden circle, and poured sweet batter over the top. When baked and flipped, the cake revealed a glossy caramel glaze that glimmered under silver tinsel and candlelight. It was both dessert and decoration, proof that modern homemaking could be as stylish as it was satisfying. Pineapple was exotic then, a taste of faraway places, and serving it on Christmas felt like luxury. This cake captured that spirit of optimism, when color and sweetness were symbols of progress and cheer. Families sliced it warm, each piece crowned with its perfect ring, the sugar syrup dripping like honey. Though trends have changed and its retro shine has faded, one glance at that golden top can still make you think of laughter, bright dresses, and the hum of an old holiday radio. Blackberry jam cake was Christmas dessert, carrying summer's wild harvest into winter celebration. This wasn't ordinary cake, but dense creation, darkened with blackberry jam stirred into batter. The jam came from wild berries picked along fence rows in July, cooked with sugar and preserved. Come Christmas, jam transformed into cake moisture and flavor, tart, sweet, purple. The batter was spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, creating warmth, complementing berry brightness. Baked in cast iron, the cake emerged dark and fragrant, its crumb tight from jam. Some families added caramel icing, others served plain. In mountain communities, blackberry jam cake represented foresight and connection to land, picking berries in summer for Christmas months away. Children remembered helping pick berries, fingers stained purple. Understanding this work would become December dessert. The cake sliced thick, each piece carrying memories of summer foraging. Bread stuffing balls were individual portions of holiday stuffing shaped and baked until crispy outside and tender within, eliminating serving challenges of casserole-style dressing. The stuffing mixture, cubed bread, celery, onions, sage, and broth, was formed into golf ball-sized spheres and arranged on baking sheets. A brush of melted butter before baking ensured golden, crispy exteriors, while interiors stayed moist. Each guest received their own perfect portion. No fighting over corner pieces or soggy centers. Children especially loved the novelty of stuffing they could pick up, and adults appreciated increased ratio of crispy surface to soft interior. Some cooks added sausage or chestnuts, creating richer balls. The individual portions made serving easier, no digging through casserole dishes while juggling plates. Bread stuffing balls represented creative problem-solving in holiday kitchens, taking a traditional dish and reimagining its presentation for practical and delicious results. Roasted chestnuts were the Christmas snack that filled homes with their distinctive sweet, smoky aroma during the holiday season. Street vendors once sold them from carts in every major city, but families also roasted their own over open fires or in the oven. The preparation required scoring each nut with an X to prevent explosion, then roasting until the shells split and the meat inside turned golden and tender. Peeling hot chestnuts was its own ritual, fingers working quickly to remove shells before the nuts cooled and became stubborn. The flavor was unlike any other nut, starchy and sweet with an almost potato-like texture that melted on the tongue. Families would gather around fireplaces, passing warm chestnuts hand to hand while Christmas carols played. The nuts also appeared in stuffings, soups, and desserts throughout the holiday season. Today, fresh chestnuts are hard to find, and the skill of roasting them has largely been forgotten. Those who remember the taste recall it as Christmas itself. Mincemeat pie was the spiced, boozy dessert that connected American Christmas to centuries of English tradition, its complex filling unlike any other holiday sweet. Traditional mincemeat combined beef sweet, dried fruits, apples, spices, and generous amounts of brandy or rum into a dark, intensely flavored filling that aged for weeks before baking. The mixture was spooned into pastry shells, often with decorative tops cut into holiday shapes. The flavor was challenging for modern palates, simultaneously sweet, savory, spiced, and boozy in ways that defied easy description. Families with English heritage maintained this tradition, making fresh mincemeat each autumn for Christmas pies. The commercial mincemeat that eventually replaced homemade versions was sweeter and simpler, lacking the complexity of the original. Mincemeat pie has largely disappeared from Christmas tables, replaced by familiar pumpkin and apple. Those who remember real mincemeat pie describe it with reverence as a taste of Christmas past. Fried pies appeared on Christmas tables as portable desserts that stretched fruit preserves into something special, the half-moon pastries filled with whatever jam or dried fruit the pantry held. Pie dough was rolled thin and cut into circles, spoonfuls of filling placed on one side before the dough was folded, and edges crimped tight with fork tines to seal in the sweetness. The pies were fried in hot fat until golden and crispy, the filling bubbling inside while the crust shattered with each bite. Apple, peach, and berry were common fillings, made from fruit preserved during summer harvest when orchards and bushes overflowed with abundance. The pies could be eaten by hand, making them perfect for children and for taking to church gatherings where plates were scarce. Fried pies represented the genius of transforming pantry staples into festive treats, each one a small celebration wrapped in flaky pastry. The technique allowed families to serve individual desserts that looked impressive. Divinity candy was Christmas magic made visible, those snow-white puffs of sweetness appearing on holiday platters alongside fudge and pralines. Making divinity required perfect conditions, low humidity, patience, and ability to judge exactly when hot sugar syrup reached the right temperature. Cooks would boil sugar, corn syrup, and water while beating egg whites until stiff, then slowly pour screaming hot syrup into the whites while continuing to beat. The mixture transformed gradually, going from glossy and thin to thick and matte, finally holding shape when dropped from a spoon. Pecans or walnuts studded each piece, adding crunch to the melt-in-your-mouth texture. On humid days, divinity refused to set, causing heartbreak for cooks who had invested an hour of arm-aching work. When it succeeded, divinity was ethereal, sweet, light, and impossibly tender. Church ladies brought platters to Christmas bazaars. Grandmothers made batches for grandchildren who watched in wonder as the candy came together through patience. Carrot copper pennies were a make-ahead marvel that freed Christmas cooks from last-minute vegetable preparation. Carrots were sliced into thin coins, blanched until tender, then marinated for days in a tangy sauce of tomato soup, oil, vinegar, and Worcestershire sauce. The coins absorbed the bright orange-red marinade until they glistened like polished copper. Green bell pepper rings and sliced onions joined the carrots, adding color contrast and crunch. What made copper pennies invaluable was their timing. They actually improved with age, developing deeper flavor after 3 or 4 days in the refrigerator. Busy hostesses could prepare them the weekend before Christmas, freeing precious hours on the holiday itself. Served cold straight from the jar, they required no reheating or fussing. The dish appeared at church potlucks and family gatherings throughout the season. Carrot copper pennies proved that practical cooking could also be delicious, a lesson in efficiency that modern meal preppers have rediscovered. Spiced orange glazed carrots were once considered an elegant Betty Crocker Christmas side dish, the kind of recipe that appeared in glossy holiday magazine spreads and hostess guides during the mid-century era. She sliced the carrots into soft rounds, simmering them until tender before covering them in a glossy orange glaze made from juice zest butter and warm spices. The glaze thickened gently on the stove, turning into a fragrant syrup that clung to each piece and made the entire kitchen smell like winter warmth. When she poured the carrots into a serving dish, their bright orange color shone against the darker holiday table settings, and the sweet citrus aroma drifted through the room like a burst of sunshine on a cold day. This dish was meant to add sophistication to inexpensive vegetables, and it succeeded by transforming something simple into something festive. In those years, elegance did not come from price, but from intention presentation and the sense of celebration that infused every carefully prepared dish. The spiced carrots felt fancy even though they used ingredients that most families already had in their kitchens. They represented the mid-century dream that a Christmas table could feel elevated through thoughtful touches and small luxuries created with care. Today, dishes like this have faded, but they remain vivid in old Betty Crocker pages, where bright glazes and soft winter spices defined December cooking. Popcorn balls were the handmade treasures of Christmas long before wrapping paper and plastic toys ruled the season. Families gathered around the stove, boiling sugar and syrup until it bubbled thick, then pouring it over fresh popped corn. The mixture hissed and popped, and everyone worked fast, buttering their hands to form perfect spheres before the syrup cooled. They were tied with red string or wrapped in wax paper, ready to be tucked into stockings or passed to neighbors. Popcorn balls were joy you could hold, cheap, cheerful, and filled with heart. The sweetness clung to your fingers, and the smell lingered in the air long after the snow outside had settled. They represented a time when Christmas gifts were handmade and happiness came from the smallest things. No store could ever match that kind of satisfaction. Today they are nearly extinct, remembered only by the few who still make them for old time's sake. But for those who do, every sticky bite is a memory reborn. Stack cake with dried apple filling was Christmas dessert requiring community cooperation and weeks of preparation. This wasn't ordinary cake, but thin layers stacked with dried apple filling, creating towering centerpiece feeding dozens. Women began drying apples in late summer, slicing thin and laying on screens until leathery. Come Christmas, apples were rehydrated and cooked with molasses and cinnamon until thick. The cake layers were simple: flour, lard, molasses, spices, rolled thin and baked separately. Assembly was ceremony, each layer placed and spread with apple mixture. The cake sat for days, letting flavors meld into something slicing clean and tasting like autumn. In mountain communities, stack cake represented cooperation because neighbors often brought layers to celebrations. The finished cake stood tall, dark layers visible through golden apple filling. This represented mountain Christmas, patient, cooperative, deeply satisfying. Stuffed celery was the appetizer that kept hands busy and conversation flowing while holiday dinners finished cooking in crowded kitchens. Celery stalks were cut into uniform lengths, their natural curves creating perfect boats for various fillings. Cream cheese mixed with blue cheese crumbles was one popular option, while pimento cheese offered southern flair. Some hostesses piped the filling in decorative ridges, while others simply spread it before arranging stalks on trays. The preparation was simple enough for children to help, making it a task assigned to young hands eager to contribute. Guests would gather in living rooms, reaching for celery sticks between sips of punch. The cool crunch of celery against creamy filling provided textural pleasure that elaborate appetizers couldn't match. Stuffed celery represented the transition from everyday snack to party food. Nothing more than celery dressed up for company. Its disappearance from modern tables seems strange given its simplicity and timeless appeal. Stuffed Cornish game hens were the elegant individual servings that made every guest feel specially honored at Christmas dinner. These small birds, each just large enough for one person, were stuffed with wild rice, dried fruit, and nuts before roasting to golden perfection. The presentation was stunning, each guest receiving their own whole bird, its skin crackling and its cavity overflowing with aromatic stuffing. Carving was unnecessary. Diners simply cut into their personal hen, the juices pooling on the plate. Families who served Cornish hens were making a statement about sophistication and abundance, providing individual birds rather than slicing from a shared roast. The hens were often glazed with orange or apricot preserves, adding sweetness and shine. This dish represented the era's fascination with elevated home entertaining when suburban hostesses aspired to elegance. Cornish hens have largely disappeared from Christmas tables, replaced by simpler preparations. Bread pudding with hard sauce transformed stale bread into Christmas luxury. The dried loaves soaked in sweetened milk and eggs until they became something entirely new. Families saved bread heels and dried slices for weeks, knowing they'd find purpose in holiday pudding. The bread was torn and soaked until saturated, then mixed with sugar, vanilla, spices, and beaten eggs before baking until puffed and golden. Raisins or dried apples added sweetness when available. The hard sauce made the dish special, butter beaten with sugar and a splash of whiskey until fluffy. Warm pudding topped with cold hard sauce created temperature contrast that elevated humble ingredients into something approaching elegant. Children received smaller portions of the whiskey-laced sauce, while adults appreciated its warming qualities. Bread pudding represented transformation, the alchemical process of turning yesterday's scraps into tomorrow's celebration. Nothing was wasted when stale bread became dessert. Figgy pudding was the Christmas dessert made famous by carols, though few singers knew what they were demanding when they refused to leave until they got some. This steamed pudding was dense with dried figs, breadcrumbs, sweet and spices, cooked in cloth-wrapped molds for hours until dark and fragrant. The figs provided sweetness and moisture that kept the pudding tender, while sweet gave richness that butter couldn't match. Brandy was usually added both to the batter and poured over before serving. Like plum pudding, figgy pudding was often set aflame at the table, blue flames dancing across its surface before being extinguished. Families made it weeks ahead, storing the wrapped pudding in cool cellars while flavors developed and deepened. The tradition connected American tables to English ancestors who had sung the same carols and demanded the same pudding for centuries, carrying beloved holiday customs across the Atlantic. Corn pudding was Southern hospitality baked into a custard, turning humble canned corn into something rich enough for Christmas tables. Cooks combined creamed corn with eggs, milk, butter, and sugar, sometimes adding flour to help it set. The mixture was poured into buttered dishes and cooked slowly until the top turned golden, while the interior remained soft and spoonable. The texture fell somewhere between cornbread and custard, dense yet creamy, with pops of whole kernels throughout. Some families added diced chilies for savory depth, while purists kept it simple. The dish required careful temperature management, as cooking too fast would curdle the eggs. Grandmothers knew exactly when to pull it from the oven, that moment when the center still jiggled slightly but would firm as it cooled. Corn pudding represented transformation of pantry staples into celebration food, proof that special occasions could be honored without expensive ingredients. Today it appears occasionally at Southern tables but has largely faded. Rabbit gravy over rice was Christmas dinner that stretched small game into meal feeding many. The rabbits were jointed and browned, then simmered until tender in broth thickened with flour into rich gravy. Served over white rice, this created complete meal that was economical and deeply satisfying. In mountain communities, rabbit gravy represented resourcefulness, turning 2 or 3 small rabbits into dinner for 10 or more people. The gravy was savory and rich, flavored with wild onions and black pepper. Rice stretched the meal further, soaking up every drop of gravy while providing filling carbohydrates. This was Christmas dinner born from necessity but elevated through care and proper technique. The rabbit meat was tender and mild, the gravy thick and comforting. Families gathered around steaming bowls, understanding that celebration came from making the most of what you had, transforming scarcity into sufficiency through skill and tradition passed through generations of mountain cooks. Cranberry bread pudding was the thrifty warm dessert families made when leftover bread met cans or jars of cranberry sauce in the days after Christmas. The bread soaked up milk eggs, sugar and spices, transforming into a custard-like base that baked into soft, comforting layers. Cranberry swirls added tart sweetness throughout, making each bite feel festive. Served warm with cream or butter, it was a dessert rooted in resourcefulness and holiday flavor. It captured the Betty Crocker belief that nothing should go to waste and that simple ingredients could bring deep comfort. The pudding filled kitchens with a gentle, spicy aroma that made even quiet winter evenings feel special, and it offered a way to turn scraps into something loved rather than forgotten. Grandparents remembered it as a dessert that made the season last just a little longer. Candied citrus peel was one of the simplest luxuries of the old holiday season. Housewives would save orange and lemon rinds, boil them in syrup until translucent, and then roll them in sugar crystals that sparkled like frost. It was candy you could make from scraps, sweet, chewy, and bright against winter's dullness. The process was slow but satisfying, filling the kitchen with citrus steam and promise. Each strip of peel became a treasure, glossy and golden as it dried on wax paper by the window. Some cooks dipped the ends in melted chocolate, while others tied them up in muslin bags to share with friends. In households where nothing was wasted, this recipe was the perfect balance of practicality and beauty. Once cooled, the peels were stored in jars or tied up in ribbons and given as gifts. Each piece carried sunshine into the coldest days of December. Before store shelves overflowed with boxed chocolates, these candied strips were the jewels of Christmas. They tasted of care and invention, a reminder that joy could come from what others threw away. To bite into one was to taste both brightness and patience, a sweetness that only time could bring. Crown Roast of Frankfurters was a playful, iconic showpiece that Betty Crocker featured in mid-century Christmas entertaining guides using little more than hot dogs, toothpicks, and creativity. The Frankfurters were sliced at the ends to form decorative fringes, then stood upright in a circle tied or pinned until they formed a crown shape. The center was often filled with mashed potatoes, stuffing, or colorful relish, giving the dish a humorous but charming appearance. Families loved it because it felt festive without requiring expensive cuts of meat, a way to bring fun to the table when budgets were tight. Kids adored its look, adults appreciated its practicality, and hosts enjoyed presenting something eye-catching with minimal effort. It symbolized a time when imagination made up for limited resources, turning the simplest ingredient into a holiday centerpiece. Today, it survives mostly in old cookbooks and faded magazine clippings, but the memory of this quirky centerpiece reflects a Christmas world where fun mattered just as much as flavor. Wild Greens Mess with Ham Hock was Christmas side that brought spring preservation to winter table. In spring, mountain families gathered wild greens, poke, lamb's quarters, dandelion, and canned them for winter. By Christmas, these jars represented summer work and wild food knowledge. The greens were cooked long and slow with smoked ham hock until tender and richly flavored. The pot liquor was savory and nourishing, meant to be sopped up with cornbread. In Appalachian communities, wild greens meant Christmas connection to land and seasons. Proving celebration included foods gathered free from hillsides. The greens were slightly bitter, balanced by ham's saltiness and smokiness. This was nutrition and tradition combined, teaching children that Christmas abundance came from knowing land and being willing to work hard, preserving what nature provided freely to those with knowledge and respect. Hot German potato salad brought old-world tradition to American Christmas tables, its warm, tangy dressing a welcome contrast to cold, mayonnaise-based versions. Cooks sliced boiled potatoes while still warm, knowing they absorbed flavors better than cold ones. Bacon was fried crisp in cast iron, then removed while its fat became the base for a dressing of vinegar, sugar, and mustard. Sliced onions softened in the hot grease before potatoes joined the pan, tumbled gently to coat every piece. The bacon was crumbled back in at the last moment to preserve its crunch. Served warm in crockery bowls, this salad steamed on holiday buffets alongside cold cuts and roasted meats. The sweet-sour balance cut through rich holiday foods perfectly. German immigrant families passed down precise vinegar-to-sugar ratios, each household believing theirs achieved harmony. Children who normally resisted potato salad often loved this version, won over by the bacon and warmth. Hot German potato salad represented heritage on the plate, connecting American celebrations to European roots. Lane cake was the southern belle of Christmas desserts, a towering white layer cake filled with bourbon-soaked fruits and nuts that made it legendary at holiday gatherings. The cake layers were tender and white, made with egg whites only, their delicate crumb providing perfect backdrop for the rich filling. The filling combined egg yolks, sugar, butter, raisins, coconut, pecans, and enough bourbon to make flavors sing. Some cooks added maraschino cherries for color. The mixture was cooked until thick, then spread between layers while still warm so it could soak into the cake. Fluffy white frosting covered everything, hiding treasures within until the first slice revealed those layers of golden, boozy filling. Lane cake was not everyday dessert. It was reserved for Christmas, weddings, and occasions worthy of the effort required. Named for its Alabama creator, the cake traveled across the South and became synonymous with gracious holiday hospitality that showed guests they were truly honored. Poor man's fruitcake appeared at Christmas when the traditional version's expensive ingredients were beyond reach, substituting whatever dried fruits and nuts the pantry held. Real fruitcake required candied citrus, exotic spices, and aged spirits that working families couldn't afford. The poor man's version used raisins, dried apples, and whatever nuts could be gathered from nearby trees, bound with molasses instead of sugar. The batter was dense and dark, baked slowly until a knife came out clean, then wrapped in cloth to age until Christmas morning. Though lacking candied cherries and imported almonds, this humble cake delivered the same comforting density and spiced sweetness that defined holiday baking. Families sliced it thin, making each loaf last through the season. Poor man's fruitcake represented adaptation, the willingness to participate in tradition even when resources demanded substitution. The taste was different, but the meaning remained. Ambrosia salad was the fluffy, sweet concoction that straddled the line between side dish and dessert, its marshmallows and coconut creating something uniquely American. Canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, and maraschino cherries were folded with miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, and sour cream. The mixture was chilled overnight, allowing flavors to meld and marshmallows to soften. Served in cut glass bowls, the pastel colors seemed appropriately festive. Children especially loved ambrosia, often requesting second helpings despite protests about ruining their appetite. The dish required no cooking, making it perfect for busy kitchens where oven space was precious. Some families added pecans or used cottage cheese, each variation reflecting regional preferences. Ambrosia has largely disappeared from Christmas tables, dismissed as too sweet and artificial, but for decades it was a beloved tradition that children anticipated all year. Old-fashioned prune cake was a humble masterpiece of Southern baking, dense, dark, and rich with spice. It looked plain on the surface, but each slice was moist with pure comfort. Prunes, soaked and mashed, gave it sweetness and depth long before refined sugar was affordable or common. Cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg added warmth, while buttermilk and molasses tied everything together. This was the kind of cake that aged well, improving each day it sat wrapped in paper on the counter. It was a grandmother's favorite. Never flashy, always dependable. Served at Christmas with coffee or whipped cream, it spoke of thrift, patience, and love that did not need decoration. Modern tastes might overlook it for lack of frosting, but one bite could remind anyone why the old recipes lasted so long. They filled you up, not just in body, but in heart. Swiss vegetable pie was a savory holiday brunch dish Betty Crocker promoted when families hosted Christmas morning gatherings and needed something warm and impressive without being costly. It began with a crust, or sometimes no crust at all, filled with vegetables such as spinach, carrots, onions, or whatever was available, mixed with eggs, cream, and Swiss cheese. As it baked, the custard set into a firm, tender filling while the cheese melted throughout, giving each bite a gentle nuttiness. The aroma of vegetables and cheese drifting from the oven signaled a slower, quieter moment in the holiday. Families sliced it into wedges served beside fruit coffee and pastries, creating a breakfast that felt comforting and celebratory. At the same time, Swiss vegetable pie belonged to an era when home cooks relied on versatile recipes that could adapt to pantry ingredients while still looking elegant on the table. It faded from modern menus as brunch trends shifted and quicker options took its place, but it remains a charming part of Betty Crocker's Christmas history. It reflected a holiday morning built on softness, warmth, and gathering before the bustle of the day began. Pickled eggs with beets were Christmas appetizers that added color and tang to holiday tables. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and packed into jars with sliced beets and spiced vinegar, turning deep magenta as they pickled. By Christmas, the eggs had absorbed beet sweetness and vinegar brightness, becoming something far more interesting than plain boiled eggs. Sliced and served cold, they provided protein and visual appeal. In mountain communities, pickled eggs represented preservation skill and resourcefulness, turning abundant summer beets and everyday eggs into Christmas specialty. The eggs were firm and tangy with slight sweetness from beets. Children were fascinated by their color, adults appreciated their complex flavor. This was Christmas food that required planning and patience, proving best celebrations came from work done months earlier, transforming ordinary ingredients into something special through time, vinegar, and knowledge. Ribbon candy was the Christmas confection that looked like frozen rainbows, thin sheets of pulled sugar folded into accordion pleats and colored in stripes of red, green, white, and gold. Making it required candy thermometers, marble slabs, and the courage to work with molten sugar hot enough to cause serious burns. Professional candy makers pulled and stretched the sugar while it was still pliable, adding colors and folding the sheets before the mixture hardened. The finished ribbons were impossibly delicate, shattering if handled roughly, and dissolving on the tongue into pure sweetness. Families displayed ribbon candy in crystal dishes, where it caught light and sparkled like decorations. Children were warned to look but not touch until Christmas Day, when the candy bowl became fair game. Each piece was unique, the folds and colors varying based on the candy maker's skill. Ribbon candy was pure celebration, too fragile and impractical for anything except special occasions when beauty mattered as much as taste. Chitterlings simmered for hours on Christmas Eve in homes where every part of the hog found purpose. The intestines cleaned and cooked until tender enough to eat. The preparation was labor-intensive. The chitlins required thorough cleaning and multiple rinses before they could be boiled with onions, vinegar, and seasonings. The smell was distinctive and polarizing, announcing to the neighborhood that a family was preparing traditional soul food. After hours of cooking, the chitlins became tender and flavorful, served with hot sauce and accompanied by cornbread and greens. Families who grew up eating chitterlings considered them a delicacy, while others couldn't get past the idea of eating intestines. The dish represented African-American culinary tradition, the transformation of discarded parts into cherished holiday food. Chitterlings connected generations through taste and memory, each batch carrying forward the knowledge of ancestors who had survived on such humble fare. Jellied cranberry mold was the shimmering ruby centerpiece that wiggled its way onto holiday tables, its rings and fluted shapes announcing Christmas had arrived. Cranberry juice was combined with gelatin, sugar, and sometimes chopped celery, walnuts, or orange zest before being poured into decorative molds and chilled until firm. Unmolding required skill and courage, a moment of tension as the gelatin released from its container onto the serving platter. The most elaborate molds created rings, stars, or Christmas tree shapes that drew admiration before the first slice was cut. The flavor was tart-sweet, the texture somewhere between firm and wobbly that either delighted or disturbed guests. Families served cranberry mold alongside turkey and stuffing, its bright color providing contrast to brown and beige. The canned cranberry sauce that replaced it never achieved the same festive presentation. Jellied molds of all kinds have disappeared from modern tables, taking with them an era when presentation required skill and patience. People today might find it too rich or too much work, but that was the point. It was meant to be made together, to take time, to stir stories between sips. The foam clung to the rim of the cup, the same way joy clung to the season itself. Ribbon salad mold was the crown jewel of mid-century Christmas buffets, an edible rainbow layered in shimmering tiers of gelatin and cream. Every church potluck and family supper table in the 1950s seemed to have one, its wobbly surface glistening under the soft glow of tinsel-covered lights. Housewives poured each layer with precision, lime, strawberry, pineapple, waiting for one to set before adding the next. The cream cheese middle was the star, cutting the sweetness with a soft tang that made the whole thing sing. It was a dish born of pride and presentation, not convenience. People admired it more than they ate it, marveling at its even stripes and jewel tones. When refrigerators became the heart of the modern kitchen, gelatin molds became a symbol of progress, and ribbon salad mold ruled the holidays. Over time, it vanished, dismissed as a relic of artificial color and outdated taste. Yet, for those who remember, its wobble was more than food. It was a reflection of an age that believed every meal deserved a little glamour. Caramel biscuit pudding was the warm, mid-century dessert that transformed leftover biscuits into something rich and comforting during winter evenings. Betty Crocker promoted it as a thrifty yet elegant solution for holiday meals using torn biscuits soaked in a caramel syrup made from brown sugar butter and milk. As the pudding baked, the biscuits absorbed the syrup and softened into tender pockets of sweetness, while the top formed a glossy, sticky layer that crackled under the spoon. It filled kitchens with the deep smell of caramel-toasted bread and Christmas spices, making even small homes feel full of warmth. This pudding was a favorite because it stretched ingredients without feeling cheap. turning scraps into a dessert that tasted indulgent, served with whipped cream or a drizzle of warm syrup. It felt like something special enough for company, yet simple enough for any winter night. Over the years, as baking trends changed, caramel biscuit pudding faded from holiday tables, replaced by quicker store-bought sweets. But for those who remember it, the dish represents resourcefulness, hospitality, and the magic of transforming everyday ingredients into something unforgettable. Cheese balls were the centerpiece of holiday appetizer tables, their nut-crusted spheres surrounded by crackers and eager guests with spreading knives. Cream cheese was blended with sharp cheddar, Worcestershire sauce, and seasonings, then shaped into balls and rolled in chopped pecans or walnuts. The mixture was chilled until firm, the nuts providing crunch against the creamy interior. Some hostesses shaped their cheese into logs or pressed it into decorative molds for variety. Cheese balls appeared at every holiday gathering, their presence as expected as the Christmas tree. Making them was simple enough for beginners, but impressive enough to earn compliments. The flavor was sharp and savory, the texture smooth and spreadable. Guests would gather around, spreading cheese on crackers while catching up on the year's news. Cheese balls have faded from prominence, replaced by artisanal cheese boards that seem more sophisticated but lack the nostalgic charm of their predecessor. Let's dig into 30 Christmas dinners from those decades that have completely disappeared. Crown roast of pork was the showstopper centerpiece that announced a family's prosperity and a mother's skill the moment guests entered the dining room. Butchers would French the rib bones and curve them into a majestic crown shape, each bone tip adorned with a paper frill that made the roast look almost too elegant to eat. The center was filled with savory stuffing, often bread-based with apples, onions, and sage, that cooked inside the meat, absorbing all those rich pork juices. Families ordered these roasts weeks in advance from local butchers who knew exactly how to prepare them. The presentation was theatrical, carried to the table on the best silver platter while everyone gasped and applauded. Carving required precision, with the host carefully separating each chop while keeping the crown intact as long as possible. The meat was succulent, the stuffing rich, and the experience unforgettable. Crown roast represented an era when Christmas dinner was performance as much as meal, when presentation mattered deeply. Harvard beets brought deep crimson elegance to holiday tables, their sweet and sour glaze glistening like rubies under dining room lights. The dish took its name from the university whose color it matched, though the connection ended there. Cooks sliced cooked beets into rounds, then simmered them in sauce of sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and butter until the glaze thickened and coated each piece. The result was simultaneously sweet and tangy, earthiness balanced by bright acidity. Some recipes called for orange zest or cloves, adding complexity to the straightforward preparation. The vibrant color made Harvard beets a visual dream, adding drama to tables dominated by browns and beiges. Children often resisted at first, but the sweet glaze converted many skeptics. This was practical cooking too, as canned beets worked perfectly fine when fresh ones were unavailable during winter. Harvard beets represented an era when vegetables were dressed up for company, transformed from everyday nutrition into worthy holiday companions. Dried corn pudding was Christmas-side that transformed summer's abundance into winter celebration. Field corn was dried on the cob in late summer, then cut off and stored in jars. Come Christmas, the dried corn was ground coarsely and simmered in milk with butter, sugar, and eggs until it became thick custard. The result was sweet and creamy with toothsome texture from corn pieces. In rural communities, dried corn pudding represented foresight, preserving August plenty for December scarcity. The pudding was comfort food that tasted like summer sunshine captured and held through winter darkness. Served warm, it accompanied ham or turkey perfectly, its sweetness balancing savory main dishes. This proved mountain cooks understood food preservation and flavor balance, creating dishes that honored both seasons and made winter celebrations possible through summer work and planning passed through generations. Chicken liver's pat log was one of Betty Crocker's attempts to make mid-century Christmas cocktail parties feel sophisticated, using ingredients that were inexpensive yet capable of appearing luxurious. Chicken livers were sautéed, blended with butter seasonings, and sometimes a splash of fortified wine before being molded into a smooth log shape and chilled until firm. Once unmolded, it was coated with herbs, nuts, or paprika to create a striking presentation that fit the elegant, entertaining style of the era. Hosts served thin slices on crackers or toast points, believing this dish brought a touch of continental flair to American holiday gatherings. The pat log became part of the vintage tradition in which presentation mattered deeply, and thrifty ingredients could be transformed with technique, imagination, and confidence. Ambrosia salad was the jewel of Southern Christmas tables, a shimmering bowl of citrus, coconut, and cream that felt like sunshine in winter. Sliced oranges, pineapple, and cherries were folded into whipped cream or sour cream layered with shredded coconut until it glowed. Every family had its own version. Some added marshmallows, others used gelatin, but all believed it brought brightness to the meal. Ambrosia was about celebration, abundance, and the joy of sharing. It was one of those dishes that looked too pretty to eat, its colors gleaming like stained glass under the dining room lights. Children would sneak spoonfuls before dinner, their fingers sticky with cream and sugar. Served in cut glass bowls, it stood proudly beside the turkey and ham, proof that fruit could feel like a feast. The recipe crossed generations, carrying whispers of grandmother's kitchens and Sunday suppers long past. Over time, it faded into nostalgia, dismissed as old-fashioned, but its spirit still lingers in every creamy fruit salad that comes after. It was sweet, tangy, and a little bit sentimental, just like Christmas itself. In its humble mix of flavors was a reminder that joy often hides in the simplest of bowls. Peppermint chiffon pie was the pale pink cloud of a dessert that once appeared on many Betty Crocker winter menus, offering a light, airy alternative to heavier Christmas sweets. It began with crushed peppermint candy folded into a chiffon mixture of whipped cream, gelatin, and sugar, creating a soft pastel filling poured into a simple crust. As it chilled, it firmed into a delicate slice that melted on the tongue, leaving a gentle mint sweetness. Its color alone made it perfect for holiday tables, reminiscent of candy canes and festive ribbons. Families served it after heavy meals because it felt refreshing instead of overwhelming. Over time, chiffon pies lost popularity, and peppermint desserts shifted toward bark and cookies, leaving this once beloved pie behind. Yet, it remains a symbol of mid-century elegance, and the Betty Crocker approach to creating desserts that looked cheerful and tasted light. It was a dish meant to bring a breath of winter freshness to the end of a warm family meal. Persimmon pudding with hard sauce was Christmas dessert that captured wild sweetness of mountain autumn. Persimmons had to be gathered after first frost when they became soft and intensely sweet, their astringency gone. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp mixed with flour, eggs, milk, spices, and molasses. Baked slowly, the pudding emerged dark and dense, its texture somewhere between cake and custard. Hard sauce, butter and sugar beaten until fluffy, flavored with vanilla or whiskey, melted over warm pudding, creating rich contrast. In mountain communities, persimmon pudding represented patience and knowledge, knowing when persimmons were ready, understanding how to preserve their flavor. The pudding was deeply spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, its persimmon sweetness unlike anything else. This was Christmas dessert that couldn't be rushed or bought, requiring understanding of seasons and willingness to wait for nature's timing. Squash casserole was Southern comfort baked golden, turning summer's yellow crookneck squash into a dish hearty enough for winter celebrations. Sliced squash was simmered until tender, then mashed with eggs, butter, and sugar until almost custard-like. Crushed crackers topped the mixture, browning into crispy crust during baking that contrasted beautifully with creamy interior. The natural sweetness of squash intensified with cooking, making this acceptable to children who might refuse vegetables. Some recipes added cheese for savory depth, while others emphasized sweetness. The dish could be assembled ahead, requiring only baking before serving. Squash casserole represented the Southern tradition of treating vegetables as worthy of indulgent preparation, butter and eggs transforming humble squash into something memorable. Charlotte Russe was the elegant Christmas dessert that arrived in individual servings, each one a small tower of Bavarian cream surrounded by ladyfingers and topped with whipped cream. The dessert required patience and skill. The cream filling had to be made from scratch, cooked custard folded with whipped cream and set with gelatin until it held its shape. Lady fingers were arranged around the inside of molds, standing upright like soldiers guarding the creamy center. Once unmolded, the charlottes looked like something from a French pastry shop, impossibly refined for home kitchens. Families served them at Christmas dinner parties where impressing guests mattered. The cream was delicate, barely sweet, flavored with vanilla or sometimes a splash of rum. Each spoonful combined the soft cookie texture of lady fingers with the airy richness of the filling. Charlotte Russe represented the height of homemade elegance, proof that American cooks could match European sophistication when the occasion demanded their finest efforts. Liver and onions appeared on Christmas tables when the luxury cuts went to wealthier customers. The organ meat sold for pennies to families who knew how to make it delicious. Liver was soaked in milk to remove any bitterness, then sliced thin and dredged in seasoned flour before frying in hot fat until crispy outside but still pink within. Onions fried alongside turned sweet and caramelized, their flavor balancing the liver's mineral richness. The combination was served over mashed potatoes or with bread to soak up the pan drippings that carried concentrated flavor. Children either loved or hated liver, but parents served it knowing the iron and vitamins it provided were essential for growing bodies during lean times. Liver and onions cost a fraction of steak, but delivered more nutrition per bite. The dish represented practical eating, the understanding that organ meat sustained life as effectively as the muscle cuts that cost far more. Fruitcake was the dense, boozy loaf that divided families into passionate defenders and determined avoiders, its candied fruits and nuts soaked in brandy for months. Bakers began preparation in autumn, combining dried fruits, nuts, and spices into batters that were baked slowly, then wrapped in brandy-soaked cheesecloth to age until Christmas. The cakes were heavy and dark, each slice revealing jewel-toned fruits suspended in rich, spiced crumb. Families who loved fruitcake guarded recipes passed down through generations. The cakes were given as gifts, arriving in tins that were either treasured or quietly regifted. The flavor was complex, sweet, boozy, spiced, and intensely fruity in ways that demanded appreciation. By the 1980s, fruitcake had become a punchline, mocked as the gift nobody wanted. Yet for those who grew up with homemade versions, the jokes missed the point entirely. Real fruitcake aged properly was a taste of Christmas tradition. Potato peel soup stretched the ultimate scraps into Christmas dinner when even whole potatoes were too valuable to spare. The peels simmered into broth that filled empty stomachs with whatever nourishment could be extracted. After potatoes were peeled for other uses, the skins were saved, washed carefully, and boiled with onions and whatever seasonings the kitchen held. The starch in the peels released during cooking, thickening the liquid into something between broth and gravy that clung to the spoon. Some families added a bit of milk when available, others kept the soup clear and simple. The flavor was subtle, earthy, and comforting despite its humble origins. Children ate potato peel soup without knowing it represented the end of resources, while parents served it with forced cheerfulness. The dish represented survival at its most basic, the refusal to waste even the scraps of scraps. Potato peel soup was Christmas dinner when there was nothing else. Ambrosia was the Christmas salad that appeared in cut glass bowls at every Southern holiday table, layers of fresh orange segments, shredded coconut, and sometimes other fruits dressed simply with their own sweet juices. The name meant food of the gods, and families treated it with appropriate reverence during the holiday season. Fresh coconuts were cracked and grated by hand, their milk saved for dressing. Oranges were peeled and sectioned carefully, all pith removed so only sweet fruit remained. Some versions added pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, or miniature marshmallows, though purists insisted on oranges and coconut alone. The salad was assembled in layers, each visible through the glass, then chilled until flavors melded together. Children often helped crack coconuts and section oranges, learning holiday traditions through hands-on work. Ambrosia was served alongside heavy meats and rich sides, its freshness cutting through the richness of Christmas dinner. Orange fluff was the cloud-like confection that children circled back to throughout holiday meals, its sherbet orange color standing out among earth-toned dishes. Orange gelatin was dissolved and mixed with cottage cheese, whipped topping, mandarin orange segments, and miniature marshmallows until impossibly light and airy. The cottage cheese provided protein and subtle tang that balanced sweetness, while marshmallows added pockets of chewy texture. Chilled until set, but still soft, orange fluff was served in glass bowls where its sunset color glowed invitingly. Some versions added crushed pineapple or chopped pecans, but purists kept the base simple. The dish required no cooking and could be assembled days ahead, perfect for busy holiday schedules. Children often asked for orange fluff specifically, knowing it would appear at Thanksgiving and Christmas without fail. Orange fluff represented the era's love of convenience desserts dressed up as salads, occupying that sweet spot between side dish and treat. Molasses taffy pull was Christmas entertainment and dessert combined into one sticky, sweet tradition. Molasses was boiled with sugar until it reached hard ball stage, then poured onto buttered platters to cool slightly. Families gathered with buttered hands, pulling the taffy until it turned from dark brown to golden and became firm. The pulling was a social event, children and adults working together, laughing as the candy stretched and folded. The finished taffy was cut into pieces and wrapped, becoming Christmas treats that lasted through winter. In rural communities, taffy pull meant Christmas fun that cost almost nothing but created memories lasting lifetimes. The candy was chewy and intensely sweet, its molasses flavor marking it as mountain treat. This represented Christmas joy created through community effort, proving best celebrations came from working and laughing together, transforming simple ingredients into sweetness through shared labor and tradition. Orange clove-baked custard was the gently spiced dessert that warmed vintage Christmas tables, offering a soft, soothing sweetness without the heaviness of pies. Milk eggs, sugar orange zest, and cloves baked slowly into a silky custard that set into tender spoonfuls, glowing faintly golden. Served warm or chilled, it was a comforting, simple dessert that balanced richness with lightness. Families appreciated its practicality because it required basic ingredients and carried the holiday scent of citrus and spice. Though overshadowed by flashier desserts, it remains a quiet classic within Betty Crocker's winter recipes. Each spoonful held the gentle warmth of oranges and cloves, the very essence of an old-fashioned holiday night where the glow of the tree and the hush of winter made simple desserts taste extraordinary. Fruitcake icebox cookies were the quieter cousin of the famous fruitcake, but in many kitchens, they were even more beloved. These cookies required no baking at all, just crushed graham crackers, condensed milk, and bits of candied fruit mixed together and chilled until firm. The recipe was the perfect solution for busy homemakers balancing work, family, and a holiday meal that needed to stretch far. Each bite tasted like nostalgia, soft, chewy, and filled with the flavors of spice and sugar that marked the season. They were stored in tins or waxed paper and handed out with care, the kind of treat that improved with time. Fruitcake icebox cookies proved that you did not need an oven to make something that tasted like Christmas. They were quick, clever, and comforting, a glimpse into an age where every ingredient mattered and every crumb carried love. Today, they have all but vanished, replaced by store-bought trays and glossy desserts. But somewhere, a grandmother still remembers how the kitchen smelled when the first batch set in the cold. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Mincemeat pie carried centuries of tradition into American Christmas celebrations, though few modern cooks would recognize what originally filled those flaky crusts. The authentic filling combined chopped beef or venison with sweet, apples, dried fruits, brown sugar, and a generous pour of brandy, a preservation method dating back to medieval England. The meat broke down during long cooking, melding with fruits and spices until the filling became something entirely new. Families would prepare mincemeat in autumn, storing it in crocks where it aged and developed complexity. By Christmas, the mixture had transformed into a rich filling, balancing sweet, savory, and boozy notes. The pies were baked in shallow tins, their crusts crimped with care, and sometimes decorated with pastry cutouts. Each household had their own recipe, some heavier on meat, others emphasizing fruit, but all sharing that distinctive spiced warmth. Mincemeat pies were served at every holiday gathering, their unusual flavor a mark of the season. Rabbit fricassee graced Christmas tables in rural communities where wild game provided protein that store-bought meat could never match in freshness or economy. Hunters brought home rabbits throughout December, and the best were saved for holiday feasts. The rabbit was jointed and browned in bacon fat until golden, then braised in milk or cream with onions and herbs until the meat fell from the bones. The cooking liquid thickened into velvety gravy that coated every piece, served over biscuits or alongside mashed potatoes. Rabbit meat was lean and delicate, its mild flavor absorbing whatever seasonings the cook applied. Families who hunted their Christmas dinner understood the connection between land and table that store-bought food could never provide. Rabbit fricassee represented self-sufficiency, the ability to provide for family through skill rather than cash. The dish tasted of independence and the understanding that nature offered abundance. Roast duck with orange sauce was the continental-inspired dish that sophisticated families served to demonstrate their worldly tastes. The duck was pricked all over to release fat, then roasted slowly until the skin turned impossibly crisp while the meat stayed moist. Orange sauce was made from scratch, combining fresh juice, zest, stock, and sometimes Grand Marnier into something bright that balanced the rich meat. The presentation was classic. Sliced duck breast fanned across plates, sauce drizzled artfully, orange segments providing color. This was aspirational cooking, inspired by French restaurants and Julia Child's television appearances. Duck required more skill than turkey or chicken, its higher fat content demanding different techniques. The dish represented cultural ambition, families embracing international cuisine as a mark of sophistication. Today, duck rarely appears on home Christmas tables, reserved for restaurants where few experience its former holiday glory. Gingerbread trifle was the unsung hero of old-fashioned Christmas tables, a layered dessert that married warmth and sweetness in every bite. It began with leftover gingerbread, dense, dark, and fragrant with molasses, crumbled into pieces and stacked with custard or whipped cream. Sometimes cooks added bits of stewed fruit or poured coffee over the layers for richness. The result was humble and heavenly, a dessert born from thrift and creativity. No one wasted cake back then. Everything could be repurposed into something new and comforting. The contrast of soft cake and silky custard made every spoonful taste like a memory of home. The trifle bowl itself was a display of abundance, its layers glowing through the glass like stripes of gold and brown. Modern desserts might be neater or sweeter, but few carry the same heart. Gingerbread trifle was proof that the best holiday recipes were never about perfection. They were about care, family, and the joy of turning leftovers into love. Though modern tastes have shifted away from such spreads, the old cookbooks preserve its place as a symbol of holiday hospitality. It remains a snapshot of a time when Christmas parties revolved around carefully arranged trays, small bites, and the belief that every guest should feel pampered, even with budget-friendly recipes. Holiday cheese ball with pimiento was once a Christmas essential displayed proudly on appetizer tables and party buffets in countless Betty Crocker holiday guides. The mixture blended cream cheese, cheddar, pimiento, and seasonings into a smooth, moldable mixture that was shaped by hand and rolled in chopped nuts for texture. Served with crackers, celery sticks, or bread rounds, the cheese ball brought color, flavor, and a sense of fun to the holiday spread. It captured the mid-century love of molded foods that were shaped, sculpted, dressed, and decorated for special occasions. The cheese ball was simple, affordable, and endlessly adaptable, making it a favorite among hostesses who wanted something reliable yet festive. Over the decades, it faded as tastes shifted toward fresher, lighter holiday foods, but vintage photos still show it shining beneath tinsel garlands and brass candlesticks. It was a symbol of celebration built from pantry staples and Betty Crocker's message that holiday magic could be made from anything when handled with pride. Sweet potato soufflé was the showstopper that made guests gasp when it emerged from the oven, puffed high and golden like an edible cloud. Unlike dense casseroles, the soufflé required whipping potatoes with eggs separated carefully, yolks beaten into warm puree, whites whipped stiff and folded in at the last moment. The mixture was seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, sweetened with brown sugar, and sometimes enriched with bourbon. Baked in a straight-sided dish, it would rise dramatically, its top browning while the interior stayed impossibly light. Timing was everything. The soufflé had to travel from oven to table immediately before it could deflate. Children pressed their faces to oven doors, watching the miraculous rise with wonder. The texture was unlike anything else, simultaneously creamy and ethereal, sweet but not cloying. Sweet potato soufflé represented kitchen ambition, a willingness to attempt something difficult for the reward of witnessing that collective intake of breath around the table. Sorghum gingerbread was Christmas dessert that captured dark sweetness of mountain agriculture. Sorghum syrup, made from cane grown and processed locally, replaced expensive molasses in gingerbread recipes. The result was cake that was moist, dark, and intensely spiced with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. Baked in cast iron and served warm, it filled houses with Christmas smells that drifted through hollows. In rural communities, sorghum gingerbread meant Christmas sweetness that didn't require store-bought ingredients, since families often made their own sorghum. The cake was dense and rich, its crumb tight from sorghum's weight. Served with butter or whipped cream when available, plain when not, it satisfied sweet cravings during lean times. This represented mountain resourcefulness, creating celebration desserts from crops grown and processed locally, proving Christmas joy came from land and labor rather than stores and money. Oyster stew appeared on Christmas Eve tables across America, a tradition combining simplicity with subtle luxury during the holiday season. The dish required nothing more than fresh oysters, butter, milk or cream, and careful attention to timing. Overcook the oysters and they turned rubbery, undercook them, and flavor stayed hidden. Cooks heated milk gently, added butter until it melted into golden pools, then slipped in oysters and their precious liquor just long enough for edges to curl. Salt, pepper, and perhaps Worcestershire completed the seasoning. The stew was ladled into warm bowls, each serving containing several plump oysters swimming in rich, briny broth. Oyster crackers floated on top, adding crunch to each spoonful. The tradition had practical origins. Catholics abstained from meat on Christmas Eve, making seafood the natural choice. But the stew also symbolized abundance, a moment of quiet celebration before the feast to come. Families passed this custom through generations, the simple bowl becoming sacred ritual. Pickled pig's feet sat in jars on Christmas tables as appetizers and accompaniments, the preserved feet providing protein and gelatin that had been prepared weeks earlier. The feet were cleaned, boiled until tender, then packed into jars with vinegar, spices, and onions that preserved and flavored them simultaneously. The pickling liquid turned slightly gelatinous from collagen released during cooking, and the meat became tangy and tender. Families served pickled pig's feet cold, the meat pulled from bones and eaten with fingers or forks. The dish was economical. Feet cost almost nothing at the butcher, and the preservation meant it could be prepared well ahead of the holiday rush. Children either loved or avoided the strange texture, while adults appreciated both the flavor and the tradition. pickled pig's feet represented the practical wisdom of preparing ahead, using preservation to transform cheap cuts into Christmas delicacies. Oyster stew was the Christmas Eve tradition that brought coastal flavors to holiday tables across America, even in landlocked states. Fresh oysters were gently poached in their own liquor with butter, cream, and just enough seasoning to enhance their briny sweetness. The stew was served in warmed bowls with oyster crackers floating on top, each spoonful delivering plump oysters in rich, silky broth. Families maintained this tradition from generations past, when oysters were abundant and affordable enough for working-class celebrations. The dish required restraint. Overcooking turned oysters rubbery. Too much seasoning masked their delicate flavor. Some families added celery or a touch of sherry, but purists insisted on simplicity. By the 1980s, oyster prices had risen and the tradition faded. Those who grew up with oyster stew Christmas Eves remember the ritual of shucking, the anticipation, and the briny warmth that meant the holiday had truly begun. Cranberry conserve was the Christmas condiment that elevated turkey and ham beyond ordinary fare. A chunky preserve combining fresh cranberries with orange, nuts, and sometimes raisins. Unlike simple cranberry sauce from a can, conserve required cooking whole berries with sugar until they burst, then folding in orange zest, chopped walnuts, and diced apple for texture. The mixture was thick enough to hold its shape yet spreadable for biscuits. Families made conserve in large batches before Christmas, filling mason jars for gifts and storage. The flavor balanced tart cranberries with sweet orange and earthy walnuts, each spoonful offering different textures. Grandmothers served conserve in cut glass dishes, the deep ruby color glowing like jewels on the holiday table. The tradition transformed a simple berry into something worthy of celebration. Though cranberry sauce remains popular, the richer conserve has largely disappeared from modern tables. Mint peas with butter were the bright green accent that added freshness to plates heavy with brown meats and beige starches. Frozen peas were cooked briefly, then tossed with butter and mint that transformed them from ordinary vegetable to something almost sophisticated. The mint provided unexpected brightness, its cool flavor cutting through rich gravies and heavy casseroles. The peas remained vibrant green, their color adding visual appeal to plates that desperately needed something fresh. Children who normally avoided vegetables often accepted mint peas, the familiar sweetness enhanced rather than masked by the herb. Some cooks added cream or lemon, though purists insisted butter and mint were sufficient. The dish required almost no effort, a few minutes of cooking and tossing, yet contributed significantly to the overall meal. Mint peas with butter represented the simple wisdom that sometimes vegetables need only gentle treatment to shine alongside more elaborate preparations. Backbone stew with root vegetables was Christmas dinner that used December butchering and fall harvest together. The pork backbones were meaty but inexpensive, perfect for slow-cooked stews. Combined with stored potatoes, turnips, carrots, and onions, they created rich, hearty meal. Simmered for hours, the bones released flavor and gelatin, while vegetables softened into the broth. In mountain communities, backbone stew represented Christmas economy, using cuts others overlooked and vegetables stored from harvest. The stew was thick and satisfying, its broth rich with pork flavor. Served with cornbread, it fed large families affordably while still feeling celebratory. The meat fell off bones easily, the vegetables were tender and sweet. This was Christmas dinner that proved celebration didn't require expensive cuts when you had time, patience, and knowledge of how slow cooking transformed humble ingredients into something genuinely delicious and nourishing. Christmas cranberry chutney mold was one of the spiced gelatin dishes Betty Crocker pushed in her mid-century holiday menus, presenting cranberries not just as sauce, but as a shaped, glistening centerpiece. Cranberries, sugar spices, and sometimes citrus were simmered down, then mixed with gelatin, and poured into decorative molds that created scalloped or fluted designs once chilled. When unmolded, the chutney held its shape, beautifully glowing red like a gem under dining room lights. Its tangy, spiced flavor paired well with turkey ham and stuffing, offering a bright contrast to heavier dishes. The mold symbolized the era when gelatin creations were considered glamorous and the height of holiday presentation. It embraced the idea that even condiments could be elevated into showpieces with the right mold and a little creativity. Though chutney molds rarely appear, now they remain a hallmark of Betty Crocker's vintage Christmas style. 7-layer dip was the Tex-Mex miracle that made every 1980s party table complete. Built in glass dishes so everyone could admire its colorful stripes, it layered beans, sour cream, guacamole, salsa, cheese, olives, and tomatoes, like edible art. It was food you could see, food that invited curiosity before you even picked up a chip. The first scoop always broke the clean pattern, but that was part of the fun. By the end of the night, it looked like a joyful mess of color and taste. Every ingredient brought its own story. Canned, refried beans for thrift, guacamole for trendiness, shredded cheese for comfort. It was multicultural celebration in a casserole dish, bold and unapologetically 1980s. Kids loved it for the color, adults for the spice, and everyone for the ease of it all. It turned any table into a fiesta, even under twinkling Christmas lights. In every creamy scoop was proof that food could be both casual and festive, both homemade and easy, a perfect symbol of its time. Maple butter-baked ham was one of Betty Crocker's most beloved Christmas dinner features, a warm, fragrant centerpiece that brought sweetness and comfort to the table. The ham was scored carefully, then brushed with a glaze made from melted butter maple syrup and spices, creating a glossy coating that caramelized as it baked. Throughout the cooking process, she basted it again and again, allowing the glaze to seep into the meat and form a rich golden crust. The aroma of warm maple and savory ham filled the house, drifting through every room and signaling that Christmas dinner was nearing. Families sliced it into thick, tender pieces, served with potatoes, vegetables, and rolls that soaked up the extra glaze. This dish represented a time when holiday meals were built on tradition and the belief that a little sweetness could elevate even the simplest ingredients. The maple glaze gave the ham a luxurious feel without adding much cost, making it perfect for families who wanted something special but still practical. Over the years, the dish faded as honey-baked hams and store-prepared options rose in popularity. Still, the memory of maple butter-baked ham remains in old Betty Crocker books, a reminder of Christmas dinners made slowly with care. It was a dish meant to bring people together around a warm table, glowing with the sense of the season. Sweet potato biscuits with honey butter were Christmas morning comfort, soft and golden, smelling of hearth and happiness. Made from mashed sweet potatoes mixed with flour and butter, they rose in the oven to tender perfection, their edges slightly crisp, their centers warm and orange. They were served with honey butter that melted on contact, dripping down the sides in golden rivers. For many Southern families, these biscuits were more than breakfast. They were tradition, passed down through generations of careful hands. Sweet potatoes were cheap, plentiful, and symbolic of resourceful joy, proof that sweetness could come from the soil. Families gathered around the kitchen table as the first batch came out, steam curling into the cool morning air. Each bite carried warmth, sweetness, and a whisper of gratitude. Today, few bake them from scratch, but for those who remember, one taste can bring back the light of 100 Christmas mornings long gone. Neck bones and rice stretched across Christmas tables in homes where ham was a luxury and turkey was a dream. The bony cuts simmered until their meat fell apart into savory shreds. Pork neck bones cost almost nothing because butchers considered them more bone than meat, but families knew better. Hours of simmering extracted every bit of flavor, the bones releasing gelatin that thickened the cooking liquid into rich gravy. The meat, though sparse, was deeply flavored and satisfying when spooned over mounds of rice that absorbed the pork-infused liquid. Some families added onions and garlic, others kept it simple with just salt and pepper. The dish required no special skills, only patience and a heavy pot that could withstand hours on the stove. Children learned to pick around bones, finding every tender morsel hidden in the joints. Neck bones and rice represented survival cooking at its most practical, turning what others discarded into Christmas dinner. Wassail was the Christmas punch that filled homes with the scent of warm spices and roasted apples, a drink meant for sharing with carolers and guests throughout the holiday season. The base was typically hard cider or ale, heated gently with cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, allspice berries, and slices of orange studded with more cloves. Small apples or crab apples were roasted until soft and floating, bursting when ladled into cups. Some recipes added sherry or brandy for extra warmth and celebration. The drink was served from large bowls, often ceramic or silver, that became family heirlooms passed down through generations. Wassailing itself was a tradition. Groups would travel house to house, singing carols in exchange for cups of the warming brew. The word came from Old English meaning good health, and toasting with wassail was believed to bring luck. Families kept the pot warm on the stove throughout Christmas Eve, refilling cups as guests arrived and conversation flowed. Molded Waldorf salad was the elegant combination of apples, celery, walnuts, and mayonnaise suspended in shimmering gelatin that graced formal holiday tables. Classic Waldorf ingredients were folded into partially set lemon gelatin, poured into decorative molds, and chilled until firm. Unmolded onto lettuce, the salad held its shape beautifully while delivering familiar flavors in each quivering slice. The gelatin added visual appeal the original creamy version lacked, transforming simple fruit salad into something worthy of special occasions. Some versions added marshmallows for sweetness, while others kept the base true to origins. The dish could be made a day ahead, freeing time on busy Christmas morning. Molded Waldorf salad represented the era's fascination with gelatin as an ingredient that could elevate ordinary foods, turning the everyday into extraordinary. Fried catfish with hush puppies was Christmas Eve tradition in communities near rivers and creeks. The catfish were caught through holes in December ice or from cold but unfrozen streams, their white flesh firm and sweet. Coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried until golden, the fish developed crackling crust while staying moist inside. Hush puppies, cornmeal fritters mixed with onions, fried alongside, creating complete meal. In rural communities along southern waterways, catfish Christmas Eve meant abundant local protein requiring only skill and patience to catch. The tradition often included whole community fish fries where neighbors gathered. The catfish was mild and flaky, the hush puppies crispy and slightly sweet. Served with coleslaw and hot sauce, this was Christmas celebration built on what rivers provided freely, proving holiday feasts didn't require expensive ingredients when you had knowledge, skill, and waters full of fish waiting for those patient enough to catch them. Turkey almondine casserole was Betty Crocker's answer to the week after Christmas when leftover turkey filled refrigerators and families wanted something warm and new. She mixed turkey with a creamy sauce, vegetables, rice, or noodles, and topped it with toasted almonds for crunch. The casserole baked into a comforting dish that stretched leftovers into another complete meal, making the holiday season feel abundant even after the main feast was gone. It represented a style of cooking where nothing was wasted and every ingredient could be transformed into something special. Over time, casseroles changed, but turkey almondine remains part of Betty Crocker's approach to thrifty holiday cooking. It reminded families that creativity mattered just as much as cost, and that even simple dishes could feel luxurious with one thoughtful topping. The warm aroma drifting from the oven made homes feel full again even after the big day had passed. Coconut snowball cake was Christmas elegance covered in white. It started as a simple butter cake, layered with cream and blanketed in shredded coconut until it resembled a perfect snowball centerpiece. Housewives displayed it proudly at the center of their tables, the coconut glistening under holiday lights like fresh powder. Each slice was soft, sweet, and cool, the kind of dessert that seemed to melt with every bite. It symbolized purity and celebration, a taste of winter magic in kitchens far from snow. Coconut was an exotic ingredient once, arriving in tins that promised tropical luxury. Mixing it into a holiday cake felt like touching two worlds at once. Even today, its old-fashioned glamour has a pull. You can almost hear the laughter of dinner guests and the scrape of a silver knife cutting through frosting when you picture it. Holiday ribbon salad layered color, flavor, and texture into one tall, shimmering dish that stood out in Betty Crocker Christmas cookbooks. Each layer used a different mixture of gelatin cream cheese fruit or whipped topping poured gently over the previous layer after it cooled just enough to hold its shape. The final result was a striped dessert that looked like a wrapped present sliced open at the table, revealing bright, cheerful bands of red, green, white, or pink grandparents made ribbon salad because it felt festive and show-stopping, even though the ingredients were inexpensive and widely available. It was chilled in loaf pans or ring molds, then unmolded onto lettuce or a serving tray dusted with coconut for extra sparkle. Kids loved its sweetness, adults loved its novelty, and hosts loved how it held together perfectly when sliced ribbon salads slowly disappeared as dessert trends shifted towards simpler baked treats. But in its time, this dish was a celebration centerpiece. It represented patience, creativity, and the belief that holiday meals deserved color and joy. Even if nobody makes it now, ribbon salad remains a bright memory of old Christmas tables that sparkled with intention and care. Fried apple pies with sorghum were Christmas dessert that children waited for all year. Dried apples from summer harvest were rehydrated and cooked down with sorghum syrup, cinnamon, and nutmeg until thick and jammy. The filling was enclosed in circles of biscuit dough, crimped shut, and fried in hot lard until golden and crackling. The result was handheld Christmas joy. Crispy outside, molten apple inside, sweet and spiced. In rural communities, fried apple pies meant celebration accessible to poorest families, since dried apples cost nothing but summer work. Children received these as special treats, burning their mouths on hot filling while snow fell outside. The pies were portable, lasting days without refrigeration, making them perfect for holiday visiting. Each bite delivered concentrated apple sweetness balanced by pastry crunch, proving that simplest ingredients could create genuine luxury when prepared with care and love passed through generations. Creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Moravian cookies were paper-thin spice cookies that required rolling dough so delicate it nearly disappeared, a Christmas tradition from North Carolina's Moravian communities that spread across the South. The dough was dark with molasses and fragrant with ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and allspice, rolled impossibly thin on floured boards until you could almost see through it. Cookie cutters shaped the dough into stars, trees, animals, and angels before baking transformed them into crisp, lacy rounds that shattered with each bite. The cookies were so thin that a dozen weighed almost nothing, yet their flavor was concentrated and intense. Moravian bakers took pride in achieving maximum thinness. The thinner the cookie, the greater the skill. Families would spend entire December days rolling, cutting, and baking hundreds of cookies for gift tins and holiday platters. The tradition connected American Christmas tables to 18th century German settlers who brought their recipes and customs to the New World. Water, gravy, and biscuits became Christmas breakfast when there was nothing else in the pantry. The gravy made from flour, fat, and water stretched to cover biscuits that were the only food remaining. Bacon drippings or lard was heated in a cast-iron skillet, flour stirred in until golden, then water added gradually until the mixture thickened into gravy. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings, and the gravy was ladled over biscuits that had been split open to catch every drop. The meal was filling if not festive, and families ate it knowing that even water gravy meant they had something for breakfast on Christmas morning. The dish represented the absolute bottom of poverty cooking, the meal when every other resource was exhausted. Yet even water gravy was served on the best plates at Christmas, because dignity mattered even when the budget didn't allow for more. Water gravy and biscuits proved that love could make any meal feel like celebration. Chestnut stuffing was the old-fashioned filling that connected American Christmas to European traditions, its sweet nuttiness complementing roast poultry perfectly. Fresh chestnuts were scored, roasted until the shells split, then peeled. A labor-intensive process that took hours but yielded incomparable flavor. The peeled chestnuts were crumbled and mixed with bread cubes, sausage, onions, and herbs, the mixture moistened with stock. The texture was substantial, the chestnuts adding richness that dried bread alone couldn't provide. Families with European heritage maintained this tradition, passing down techniques for the temperamental nuts. Fresh chestnuts were available only seasonally, sold by street vendors who knew their customers waited all year. This stuffing has nearly disappeared, replaced by packaged versions that can't match the original. The labor required, and the disappearance of fresh chestnut vendors, ended a tradition that once defined Christmas flavor. Clove-spiced ham with pineapple rings was the glittering centerpiece of post-war Christmas dinners, a dish that managed to feel both elegant and practical at once. In the 1950s, every holiday table wanted to look like a magazine cover, and this ham was the shining star, scored in neat diamond patterns, studded with cloves like jewels, and dressed in sweet slices of golden pineapple held down by red cherries. The glaze of brown sugar and mustard bubbled to perfection, coating the ham in a glossy finish that filled the kitchen with a scent no candle could imitate. It was a dish of showmanship, born from an age obsessed with hospitality and abundance after years of war and rationing. Housewives took pride in presenting something that looked grand, even if it came from a can or on a tight budget. Over time, though, the pineapple rings and shiny glaze became symbols of dated taste, too flashy, too artificial for modern sensibilities. Yet for many families, that smell of cloves and caramelized fruit is still the scent of home, of laughter around a crowded table, of everything the holidays once meant. Christmas snow salad was the kind of festive chilled dish that Betty Crocker promoted when families loved adding creamy sweet salads to their holiday tables. It was made from whipped cream pineapple marshmallows and sometimes nuts folded together until the mixture resembled soft winter snow piled into a glass bowl. The salad sat in the refrigerator for hours where it firmed slightly, becoming cool and airy with every ingredient suspended in a cloud-like mixture. On Christmas Day, it was spooned onto plates beside ham or turkey, adding a bright sweet contrast to the savory dishes. Children loved its softness, while adults appreciated its novelty and gentle sweetness, especially in an era when holiday meals often featured both savory and dessert. Like sides, Christmas snow salad was more than a dish, it was a moment of whimsy on an otherwise heavy winter table. Its white color mirrored the season and made every plate look more cheerful. Over time, tastes shifted and the idea of sweet salads faded from Christmas menus, leaving recipes like this tucked inside old holiday cookbooks. Yet for grandparents, it represented a style of entertaining where joy was found in simple ingredients whipped into something that felt magical. It was a taste of mid-century Christmases when creativity, warmth, and a bit of playful indulgence defined the holiday meal. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Japanese fruitcake had nothing to do with Japan. The name remains a mystery, but the cake itself was pure Southern Christmas tradition. 3 or 4 spice cake layers alternated with coconut-filled layers, the whole construction held together by a boiled white frosting, studded with fresh coconut and sometimes raisins. The spice layers were dark with cinnamon, allspice, cloves, and nutmeg, while the white layers stayed pale and tender. Between each layer went the filling, a cooked mixture of coconut, sugar, and sometimes crushed pineapple that added moisture and tropical sweetness. The finished cake was massive, often requiring a special stand to display properly at holiday gatherings. Slicing revealed the dramatic contrast between dark and light layers, each bite offering different flavors and textures. Grandmothers guarded their Japanese fruitcake recipes, passing them to daughters who continued the tradition. The cake required an entire day to assemble properly, but lasted through the holiday week. Chicken feet soup simmered on Christmas stoves in communities where every part of the bird found purpose, the gelatinous feet creating broth richer than any made from expensive cuts. Butchers gave away feet for pennies or nothing, considering them waste that customers would reject. But knowing cooks understood that feet contained collagen that melted into silky, bodybuilding broth during hours of slow simmering. The feet were cleaned thoroughly, blanched to remove impurities, then added to pots with vegetables and herbs. The resulting soup was golden and rich, its texture almost creamy from dissolved gelatin. Families served it as a first course before whatever main dish the budget allowed, the soup warming bodies and filling stomachs. Children might have been squeamish about the feet floating in their bowls, but they loved the taste. Chicken feet soup represented the wisdom of waste-nothing cooking, transforming discards into nourishment. Scalloped potatoes au gratin were the bubbling, golden casserole that emerged from ovens across America, their creamy layers and crispy cheese topping satisfying even the pickiest guests. Potatoes were sliced thin by hand, no food processors yet, then layered in baking dishes with butter, flour, cream, and sharp cheddar cheese. The casserole baked slowly, the potatoes softening as the sauce thickened and the top turned golden brown. Each serving revealed those beautiful layers, potato slices held together by rich, cheesy sauce. Families made these potatoes for every major holiday, the recipe unchanged for generations. The dish required time and attention, the potatoes needing thin, even slices for proper cooking. Children loved the crispy edges and cheese, while adults appreciated how the richness complemented roast meats. Modern scalloped potatoes often use shortcuts, but nothing matches the version made from scratch with patience and real cream. Suet pudding was a relic from another century, dense, steamed, and spiced with memories of hearth and hardship. It came from the days when ovens were rare and every meal was slow-cooked with purpose. Housewives mixed suet, the rendered fat of beef or mutton, with molasses, dried fruit, and flour, then tied it up in cloth and steamed it for hours. The kitchen would fill with the scent of nutmeg and cinnamon, the windows fogged from the heat of boiling pots. When the pudding emerged, it was heavy, fragrant, and rich, more nourishing than fancy. Suet pudding was the Christmas dessert of settlers, sailors, and survivors, each slice a testament to endurance. Served with a warm sauce or a dollop of cream, it felt like a feast in a time when feasts were rare. It has long vanished from American tables, deemed too old-fashioned, too heavy. Yet somewhere between the steam and the spice, it held the essence of a holiday that valued warmth over show. Dutch Appelkuchen was the cozy breakfast treat Betty Crocker pushed during the holiday season, combining soft dough, warm apples, and a sugary crumble topping. It was baked in wide pans so that families could cut generous squares on Christmas morning, filling the house with the smell of cinnamon-rising dough and sweet apples. This dish blended the feel of coffee cake with the tenderness of fruit pastries, making it both comforting and celebratory. It disappeared as store-bought pastries replaced homemade breakfasts, but it remains one of the most nostalgic Betty Crocker holiday bakes. Grandparents served it warm with butter melting into the top, and children gathered close to the table, waiting for their piece as the winter sun came through frosted windows. It made mornings feel special long before gifts were opened. Whole hog shoulder with crackling bread was Christmas feast requiring community effort, turning December butchering into celebration. Mountain families raised hogs specifically for Christmas slaughter, feeding them all year. The shoulder was large enough to feed extended family, fatty enough to stay moist during long cooking. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, then slow roasted over hickory coals in outdoor pits men tended throughout Christmas Eve night. Fat rendered slowly, creating crispy bark outside while inside stayed tender. Women saved cracklings, crispy rendered pork fat bits, to mix into cornbread batter. The crackling bread baked in cast-iron skillets, top golden and crunchy. In rural Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi, this meant Christmas smelling like wood smoke for miles. Families gathered around outdoor fires, sharing whiskey and stories while meat cooked through cold night. The finished shoulder pulled apart easily, juice running into crackling bread. Frozen fruit salad was the jewel of holiday buffets, its pastel sweetness providing cool contrast to hot, savory dishes crowding Christmas tables. Cream cheese was whipped with mayonnaise until smooth, then folded together with whipped cream, canned fruit cocktail, maraschino cherries, and miniature marshmallows. Some versions added crushed pineapple or mandarin oranges for extra fruit presence. The mixture was poured into loaf pans and frozen solid, then sliced into pink-tinged rounds that held their shape beautifully on lettuce-lined platters. The texture was unlike anything else on the table. Frozen yet creamy, sweet yet tangy from the cream cheese base. Children adored it, begging for extra slices, while adults appreciated how it could be made weeks in advance. The salad straddled categories, appearing sometimes with sides and sometimes with desserts. Frozen fruit salad represented the 1970s love of make-ahead entertaining, proving that planning could produce something genuinely delightful. Persimmon pudding was the Christmas dessert that depended entirely on finding perfectly ripe wild persimmons, a fruit that rewarded patience but punished impatience with mouth-puckering astringency. Families in the Midwest and South knew to wait until after the first hard frost, when persimmons softened into orange globes of concentrated sweetness. The pulp was pushed through sieves to remove seeds and skin, creating a thick puree that gave the pudding its distinctive flavor, somewhere between dates and honey with hints of cinnamon. The batter was simple: persimmon pulp mixed with flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and spices, then baked until set and deeply caramelized. The texture was dense and sticky, almost like fudge, demanding to be eaten warm with hard sauce or whipped cream. Persimmon pudding appeared only at Christmas because that was when the fruit ripened. Families who knew good persimmon trees guarded them jealously. The dessert connected people to the land and seasons in ways modern cooking rarely does. Molasses cake emerged from ovens on Christmas morning in homes where refined sugar was too expensive, the dark sweetener providing depth of flavor that white sugar couldn't match. Flour, molasses, eggs, and spices were beaten together and baked until the cake rose and set, its surface dark and fragrant with the smell of ginger and warm spices. The flavor was complex, sweet but with bitter undertones, spicy from ginger and cinnamon that enhanced the molasses rather than competing with it. The cake was served plain or with a simple glaze, its dense texture satisfying in ways that lighter cakes couldn't be. Molasses was affordable because it was a byproduct of sugar refining, making it the sweetener poor families relied on throughout the year. The cake could be baked ahead and stored, improving with age as the flavors melded together. Molasses cake represented making virtue of necessity, discovering that cheaper ingredients could produce results as satisfying as expensive ones. Stuffed celery sticks were the simple appetizer that appeared on relish trays and party platters, their crisp channels filled with cream cheese, pimiento cheese, or savory spreads. Celery was cut into uniform lengths, the natural groove providing perfect vessels for fillings. Cream cheese mixed with olives, pimientos, or blue cheese was piped or spread into each stalk. The combination of crisp, watery celery with rich, creamy filling satisfied guests before heavier courses arrived. Children especially loved stuffed celery, the vegetable made appealing by its creamy cargo. Making them required patience. Each stalk needed individual attention. Some hostesses topped their stuffed celery with paprika or chopped nuts for color and texture. The dish represented the era's attention to appetizer presentation, when even simple vegetables were dressed up for company. Stuffed celery has largely disappeared from holiday tables, replaced by hummus and crudités that feel more modern. Cornflake Christmas wreaths were sticky, sweet, and green, the kind of treat that made every child's eyes light up in the 1960s. They were crafted from melted marshmallows, butter, and cornflakes, tinted with food coloring and dotted with tiny red candies. Simple, messy, and irresistible, these wreaths were a mother's quick solution for something festive without breaking the budget. Children shaped them by hand, their fingers coated in syrupy sugar, while laughter filled the kitchen. No one cared if they looked uneven or stuck to the wax paper. The fun was in the making. These little wreaths symbolized everything pure about mid-century Christmas joy, creativity, resourcefulness, and togetherness. They cooled on countertops, glistening like ornaments you could eat, waiting to be carried to school parties or shared after church. They might not appear on holiday tables today, replaced by sleek desserts and store-bought cookies, but their memory lingers like the sound of wrapping paper and carols. One bite could still take anyone back to the warmth of a simpler season. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor, unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Cranberry candles mold was the kind of festive display that once sat proudly in the center of mid-century holiday tables, glowing red like stained glass under soft Christmas lights. Betty Crocker guides taught home cooks how to turn canned cranberry sauce, gelatin, and fruit into tall, candle-shaped molds that slid out of tin forms with a glossy wobble. Your grandparents loved these because they represented celebration on a budget, bright color without expensive ingredients, and a sense of style that made even simple meals feel special. The molds were often arranged on lettuce leaves or parsley borders with little almond slices or pineapple bits acting as pretend flames at the top. It was playful and decorative and absolutely everywhere in 1960s and 1970s cookbooks. Making them took patience because each mold had to chill long enough to hold its shape. But once they set, they looked like something pulled straight from a vintage magazine spread. Over time, gelatin dishes fell out of fashion, and cranberry candles mostly disappeared, leaving behind a memory of holidays when creativity mattered more than cost. The molds were not just food. They were holiday excitement in edible form, shaped by hands that wanted Christmas to feel magical no matter the budget. Spiced nuts were the Christmas snack that filled bowls at every holiday gathering. Whole nuts roasted with butter, sugar, and warm spices until irresistibly crunchy and aromatic. Pecans and walnuts were favorites, though almonds and mixed nuts appeared too. The coating was simple: egg white whisked with sugar, cinnamon, and salt. But technique mattered greatly. Nuts had to be spread in single layers and roasted slowly, stirred frequently while the coating set into a crisp shell that shattered between teeth. The finished nuts were addictive, each handful disappearing faster than cooks could refill the bowl. Families made large batches each December, packaging some in cellophane bags tied with ribbons for teacher gifts and neighbor offerings. The aroma of roasting spiced nuts filled homes with the smell of the season, announcing that Christmas preparations were officially underway and the holidays had arrived. Rice pudding appeared on Christmas dessert tables when eggs and milk were available, but expensive ingredients like chocolate and nuts were not. The creamy custard studded with raisins, satisfying sweet cravings simply. Leftover rice was baked with milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla until it set into a creamy pudding that could be served warm or cold. Raisins added sweetness and texture, plumping in the custard as it baked until they burst with concentrated flavor. Some families added cinnamon or nutmeg, others kept the flavor pure and simple. The pudding was economical, using rice that might otherwise have been discarded and eggs from backyard chickens that cost nothing but feed. Children loved its gentle sweetness, and adults appreciated how it stretched limited ingredients into a dessert that looked and tasted intentional rather than improvised. Rice pudding represented thrift dressed as tradition, the transformation of leftovers into something worth serving on Christmas Day. Baked ham with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries was the iconic centerpiece that defined American Christmas through the 1960s and 70s. The ham, usually a bone-in shank or butt portion, was scored in diamond patterns, each intersection studded with a whole clove that released fragrance as it baked. Canned pineapple rings were arranged across the surface and secured with toothpicks, a bright red cherry placed in each ring's center. Brown sugar and mustard glaze was brushed over everything, caramelizing into sticky sweetness that dripped down the sides. The presentation was unmistakably festive, the ham gleaming amber and gold under dining room lights. Slicing revealed pink meat with that distinctive ham flavor that paired perfectly with sweet glaze. Families served this alongside scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, and dinner rolls. The pineapple cherry ham has become a punchline today, dismissed as kitschy, but for millions it represented Christmas abundance and maternal love. Sugar plum candy was Christmas magic rolled into bite-sized memory. Despite what the poem suggests, sugar plums were not plums at all. They were small, hand-rolled balls of dried fruit, honey, nuts, and spice, each one glimmering under a dusting of sugar. Making them was an act of patience, not luxury. Families in the 1800s crushed figs and dates, stirred in crushed almonds, and worked the mixture by hand until it was sticky and warm. They were shaped, rolled, and left to set overnight, filling homes with the scent of cloves and orange peel. Sugar plums were gifts, offerings, and treasures tucked into paper boxes for neighbors or children. They symbolized sweetness earned through effort, the kind of treat made only once a year when time slowed down enough to do it right. Today, they are a ghost of the Victorian table, replaced by chocolates wrapped in foil or store-bought truffles. But back then, a single sugar plum could make a child feel rich. It was joy you could taste, and love you could hold in your hand. Holiday meatloaf with cherry glaze was Betty Crocker's attempt to dress up an inexpensive everyday dish for Christmas gatherings. The loaf was seasoned with onions, herbs, and breadcrumbs, then baked and brushed with a glossy cherry glaze that added sweetness, color, and shine. It brought a festive look to simple ingredients and made holiday meals feel abundant even when money was limited. Though unusual by modern standards, it reflects a time when presentation mattered and creativity turned inexpensive meals into something worthy of celebration. Families enjoyed its balance of savory and sweet, and the glaze made it look like something that belonged beside the more traditional holiday dishes. It was proof that even humble meals could feel special with the right touch. Leather breeches with fatback brought summer's green beans to Christmas through ancient preservation. These weren't canned beans, but fresh beans strung on thread in late summer and hung from rafters. By Christmas, they hung brown, rattling when touched. The beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with fatback until tender. The result tasted like concentrated summer with smoky richness. In Appalachian homes, leather breeches represented connection between seasons, August abundance preserved for December. Grandmothers taught granddaughters proper stringing, threading beans carefully for drying. The beans hung all fall, visible reminders of summer work feeding Christmas tables. Cooked long, they became tender with chewy texture unlike fresh beans. The pot liquor was rich, sopped with cornbread. This represented mountain resourcefulness, preserving without equipment, feeding families through winter using thread and time. Scalloped oysters were a Christmas tradition in coastal communities where briny bivalves signified celebration and abundance. Layers of shucked oysters nestled between buttery cracker crumbs in shallow baking dishes, each layer doused with oyster liquor, cream, and butter. Seasonings were simple: salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce to enhance oceanic flavor. The casserole baked until tops turned golden while oysters beneath plumped and released juices into the cream. The result was rich and delicate, soft oysters against crunchy cracker layers. For families with New England or Southern roots, this dish carried generations of memory, appearing on holiday tables reliably as the tree itself. Children often developed their taste for oysters through this dish, familiar crackers making unusual protein approachable. The smell alone announced Christmas had arrived. Though fresh oysters remain available, scalloped oysters have largely faded, remembered now mainly by elders who associate the dish with their finest holiday memories. Duchess potatoes were the piped golden rosettes that turned simple mashed potatoes into elegant garnish worthy of the finest Christmas roasts. Potatoes were riced until perfectly smooth, enriched with butter, egg yolks, and cream, then piped through pastry bags into decorative swirls on baking sheets. A brush of egg wash before baking created golden, crispy exteriors, while the insides stayed creamy. The presentation was stunning. Each rosette a perfect spiral that looked far more difficult than it was. Families arranged Duchess potatoes around roasts or served them as individual portions that made guests feel specially treated. The technique required a steady hand and proper consistency. Too wet, and the potatoes wouldn't hold their shape. Too dry, and they cracked. Duchess potatoes represented the era's embrace of French technique in home cooking. They have largely disappeared, replaced by simpler preparations that don't require piping bags or the patience to create individual portions. Salmon patties became Christmas dinner when canned fish provided the only affordable protein. The pink cakes fried until crispy and served with gravy or alongside vegetables from the cellar. Canned salmon was mixed with crushed crackers or breadcrumbs, egg to bind, and onion for flavor, then shaped into patties and fried in hot fat until golden on both sides. The fish's distinctive flavor came through despite the additions, each patty delivering protein that fresh fish would have cost too much to provide. Families served salmon patties with white gravy made from the pan drippings, stretching the meal further while adding richness. The cans themselves were saved and repurposed, nothing wasted in households where every resource mattered. Salmon patties represented accessibility, the ability to serve fish for Christmas dinner regardless of geography or income. The dish proved that celebration didn't require fresh ingredients, just skill in preparing what was affordable. Syllabub was the frothy Christmas drink that preceded modern eggnog, a mixture of cream, wine, and sugar whipped until light and airy enough to float on top of glasses. The tradition came from England, where syllabub had been served at celebrations since Elizabethan times. American cooks adapted it using whatever wine or spirits were available: sherry, Madeira, or hard cider. The cream was whipped with sugar and lemon juice until it formed soft peaks. Then the wine was folded in gently to avoid deflating the mixture. Some versions were thin enough to drink, while others were thick enough to eat with spoons. Syllabub was served in special glasses that showed off the layers, frothy cream floating above the wine below. Guests would sip the wine first, then spoon up the cream. The drink was delicate and celebratory, meant for Christmas parties where elegance mattered. Few modern cooks know syllabub, though it once graced every proper holiday table. Baked pineapple casserole was the sweet surprise that appeared beside holiday hams, its tropical flavor providing brightness amid heavier winter fare. Canned pineapple chunks were combined with sugar, flour, and sharp cheddar cheese, a combination that sounded strange but tasted magnificent. The mixture was topped with buttery cracker crumbs and baked until bubbling and golden, cheese melting into strings that stretched with each serving. The dish straddled sweet and savory in ways that confused first-time tasters but converted them by second bite. Children loved its candy-like sweetness, while adults appreciated how pineapple's acid cut through rich ham. Some recipes added eggs for custard-like texture, while others kept it chunky. This casserole required minimal preparation but delivered maximum impact, making it a favorite of hostesses managing multiple dishes. Baked pineapple casserole represented the era's willingness to experiment. Proving strange pairings sometimes became beloved traditions. Baked sweet potatoes with butter and cinnamon were Christmas side that elevated garden staples into celebration. The sweet potatoes were stored in root cellars from fall harvest, their starches converting to sugars through winter. By Christmas, they were intensely sweet and ready for baking. Roasted whole until soft and caramelized, the potatoes were split and topped with butter and cinnamon, creating simple perfection. In rural communities, sweet potatoes represented food security. Easy to grow, simple to store, delicious when prepared well. Christmas meant breaking out the biggest, best potatoes saved specifically for celebration. The flesh was orange and creamy, naturally sweet without added sugar. Children loved sweet potatoes because they tasted like dessert despite being dinner. This represented mountain Christmas philosophy, taking what grew easily and treating it with enough respect to make it special, proving celebration didn't require expensive ingredients when you had good land and patient hands. Turkey-stuffed celery boats were the retro cold appetizer from Betty Crocker's 60s and 70s. Christmas hostess sections combining leftover turkey with mayonnaise seasonings and sometimes chopped vegetables. The mixture was spooned into crisp celery sticks, creating a refreshing, crunchy bite that balanced richer dishes. These celery boats appeared on party trays at a time when presentation favored neat, tidy finger foods that guests could enjoy while mingling. Though rarely seen now, they represent a chapter of holiday entertaining built around thrift, creativity, and charm. Angel pie with lemon filling was the delicate meringue-crusted dessert that once dazzled mid-century Christmas tables with its airy texture and bright flavor. The crust was made from whipped egg whites and sugar baked until crisp, then filled with silky lemon cream and chilled. Its snowy appearance and light citrus taste made it a perfect winter dessert, especially for hostesses who wanted something elegant. Over time, it faded from popularity, but vintage Betty Crocker books preserve this ethereal pie as one of the gentlest, sweetest holiday treats of its era. Eggnog pie was a silky, golden dream poured into a flaky crust, carrying all the warmth of Christmas in every spoonful. It began as a clever way to stretch leftover eggnog into something new, but soon it became a holiday classic in its own right. The filling was rich with nutmeg, rum extract, and creamy custard, baked until just set and chilled until smooth. It was the kind of dessert that did not shout for attention. It simply waited quietly to be remembered. Families would top it with whipped cream or dust it with spice before serving it after long dinners filled with laughter. Eggnog pie was more than just dessert. It was the final note of harmony at the end of a perfect day. Its soft sweetness lingered, echoing the songs on the radio and the faint glow of tree lights through frosted windows. In a world that moves too fast now, there's something deeply comforting about a pie that asks you to slow down and taste the season. Date nut bread rings were one of the most beloved mid-century holiday hostess staples, shaped in ring molds and served with smooth cream cheese or butter. Betty Crocker encouraged home bakers to use them for Christmas open houses because they were easy to slice, easy to serve, and visually stunning. The bread itself combined chopped dates, nuts, flour, eggs, and sugar into a dense, moist loaf with a rich caramel-like sweetness. Shaping it into a ring made it feel instantly festive, especially when decorated with a small bow or placed on a holiday platter. Guests cut small slices, spread them with cream cheese, and enjoyed them alongside coffee or hot cider. It was the kind of treat that felt homemade and elegant at the same time. Date nut bread rings eventually fell out of favor as molded breads and ring pans disappeared from common kitchens, but they remain a beautiful example of mid-century holiday entertaining. In Betty Crocker's world, they symbolized hospitality, creativity, and warmth. They were meant to fill a table with generosity during the season of sharing. Candied carrots with brown sugar transformed an ordinary root vegetable into a glazed masterpiece that glistened under dining room chandeliers. Cooks sliced carrots into coins, then simmered them in butter and brown sugar until natural sugars caramelized into a sticky coating. Some recipes called for orange juice to brighten the sweetness, while others added cinnamon for warmth. The carrots emerged tender but not mushy, each piece wrapped in glossy amber glaze that caught candlelight beautifully. This dish bridged the gap between vegetable and dessert, making it popular with children who otherwise avoided anything orange on their plates. Grandmothers passed down specific butter-to-sugar ratios, guarding proportions like family secrets. The carrots were economical. A single bag could feed a dozen guests when properly prepared. Though they required constant attention to prevent burning, the reward was a side dish that disappeared faster than mashed potatoes. Candied carrots represented holiday indulgence applied to humble ingredients. Plum pudding with hard sauce was the dramatic finale to Victorian and early American Christmas dinners, a dessert demanding weeks of preparation that arrived flaming with brandy. Despite the name, no plums appeared. The term referred to dried fruits like raisins, currants, and candied peel studding the dense, steamed cake. Suet provided richness, breadcrumbs gave structure, and eggs bound everything with brown sugar, spices, and enough spirits to preserve the pudding for months. The mixture was packed into cloth-lined molds and steamed for hours, then stored until Christmas, when it was steamed again. The hard sauce: butter whipped with powdered sugar, vanilla, and brandy until fluffy, melted over the warm pudding, creating pools of sweetness. The serving moment was theatrical, with blue flames dancing across the surface as brandy was ignited. Families gathered in wonder, watching fire burn off before slicing into the dark, fragrant dessert that connected them to centuries of tradition. Salt pork and potatoes appeared on Christmas tables when fresh meat was beyond reach, the preserved pork providing flavor and fat that transformed simple potatoes into something worth celebrating. Salt pork cost far less than fresh cuts and kept indefinitely in cool cellars, making it the protein that struggling families could actually afford. Thick slices were fried until crispy and rendered, their fat saved for cooking potatoes that were sliced and fried in the drippings until golden and crisp. The combination was simple but deeply satisfying, the salt and fat making each potato bite rich and flavorful. Some families added onions to stretch the meal further, others kept it pure. The dish required no special occasion to appear, but on Christmas it was presented with extra care, the crispiest pieces reserved for children. Salt pork and potatoes represented making do with what was affordable, finding celebration in the humblest ingredients through careful preparation and love. Roast goose was the traditional Christmas bird before turkey claimed the holiday throne, its rich, dark meat and crispy skin gracing tables for centuries. Families who kept geese would select their Christmas bird months in advance, fattening it until it reached proper size. The preparation began the night before, with the bird hung to dry so the skin would crisp properly during roasting. Goose fat rendered during cooking was saved religiously, liquid gold for roasting potatoes throughout the winter. The meat was darker and richer than turkey, with a flavor that demanded respect and proper accompaniments like red cabbage and applesauce. Carving goose required different skills than turkey, the anatomy being distinct. By the 1980s, goose had largely disappeared from American Christmas tables, replaced by the blander but more forgiving turkey. Those who remember goose Christmases speak of them with reverence, mourning a tradition that connected them to centuries of holiday feasting. Pot liquor and cornbread dumplings turned the cooking liquid from greens into Christmas soup that wasted nothing and nourished everyone. After collards or turnip greens simmered with pork for hours, the resulting pot liquor was rich with vitamins, minerals, and smoky pork flavor. Rather than discarding this precious liquid, cooks dropped cornmeal dumplings into the simmering broth, where they puffed and absorbed the flavorful liquor. The dumplings were served in bowls with pot liquor ladled over, creating a complete meal from what might otherwise have been thrown away. Families understood that the liquid held as much nutrition as the greens themselves, making pot liquor too valuable to waste. Children slurped the broth and ate dumplings while adults appreciated the economy of the dish. Pot liquor and dumplings represented the waste-nothing philosophy that kept poor families fed. Every drop of cooking liquid honored and used. Date nut bread appeared in Christmas kitchens when cooks wanted something special that wasn't quite cake and wasn't quite bread, a sweet loaf perfect for breakfast or afternoon tea. The batter came together quickly. Chopped dates were softened in hot water or coffee, then mixed with flour, sugar, eggs, and generous handfuls of walnuts or pecans. The loaves baked slowly in narrow pans, emerging dark and fragrant with tender crumb that sliced cleanly. Some recipes called for orange zest, others added spices, but dates and nuts remained constant. The bread improved after a day of resting, wrapped in foil while flavors melded. Families sliced it thin and spread cream cheese across each piece, the tangy cheese balancing concentrated sweetness. Date nut bread was proper food for company, served on good china with coffee or tea. Mothers made multiple loaves each December, keeping some for the family and gifting others to neighbors as edible expressions of holiday warmth and thoughtful generosity. Fried squirrel with milk gravy turned small game into Christmas celebration, tasting like hickory nuts and mountain tradition. December, squirrels were fat from fall acorns, their meat firm and flavorful. Young boys went hunting Christmas Eve morning, fathers teaching them to shoot cleanly. The squirrels were cleaned, cut into pieces, then soaked overnight in salt water. On Christmas morning, they were dredged in seasoned flour and fried in hot lard until golden crispy. Pan drippings became milk gravy, flour stirred into hot fat, then milk added slowly until thickened creamy. Families served this over fresh-baked biscuits. In Appalachian communities, Squirrel Christmas meant teaching children to hunt, to provide. Understanding food came from work. The meat was tender and slightly nutty, each piece representing hours in cold December woods. Mothers fried batch after batch, keeping platters warm. This wasn't poverty food, but tradition connecting tables to land itself. Swedish tea ring was the warm, fragrant holiday breakfast pastry that filled mid-century kitchens on Christmas morning, thanks to its placement in Betty Crocker's festive baking guides. The ring began as a rich yeast dough rolled out and spread with cinnamon sugar butter and chopped nuts before being shaped into a circle and sliced partway through to create its distinctive twisted pattern. As it baked, the layers puffed into golden spirals, each one scented with spice and sweetness, drifting through the house like a holiday invitation. Families gathered around the table to tear off pieces while the ring was still warm, letting the sticky filling cling to their fingers and plates. It was both a breakfast and a celebration, an edible centerpiece meant to welcome the day with comfort and joy. The Swedish tea ring symbolized the idea that holiday mornings deserved something homemade and special even when money or time was limited. Once beloved in households across the country, it slowly disappeared as store-bought pastries replaced the ritual of rising early to bake. But the memory of that warm, ring-shaped pastry remains part of the old Betty Crocker Christmas spirit, where traditions were built from dough sugar and shared moments around the kitchen table. Fig preserves cake was born in the rural South, where fig trees were common and nothing went to waste. Housewives gathered ripe figs at the end of summer, boiled them down into thick preserves, and saved them for special occasions. especially Christmas. The cake was heavy, dark, and sweet, flavored with spice and syrup, and brushed with more preserves after baking for shine. Each slice tasted like the memory of warm sunlight carried into winter. It was more than dessert. It was the story of Southern thrift and generosity, of families who made something grand from what they had. The batter came together slowly, stirred by hand in chipped ceramic bowls, while the scent of molasses and cinnamon filled the room. When the first bite met your tongue, it was soft and earthy, with a sweetness that deepened as it cooled. People brought it to church socials, wrapped in wax paper, as both offering and pride. For many families, this was the closest thing to fruitcake they could afford, and it quickly became a holiday tradition. The figs gave moisture, the spices gave warmth, and the love gave meaning. Today, it is a rare sight, forgotten among simpler sweets. But in its day, fig cake was proof that homegrown ingredients could taste as rich as anything from a bakery. Tom and Jerry was the hot cocktail that warmed Christmas gatherings when cold winds blew outside and families crowded into parlors and kitchens. The drink required its own special batter, a mixture of beaten eggs, sugar, spices, and sometimes rum that could be prepared ahead. When guests arrived, spoonfuls of batter went into special Tom and Jerry cups, followed by shots of brandy and rum, then hot milk to fill the cup. The drink was stirred quickly and topped with fresh nutmeg grated over the foam. Each sip delivered warmth, sweetness, and enough spirits to loosen conversation and laughter. Families owned dedicated Tom and Jerry bowl sets, often received as wedding gifts, that appeared only at Christmas. The ritual of making drinks became part of the celebration, with someone stationed at the bowl throughout the evening to serve arriving guests. Hotels and restaurants once offered Tom and Jerry during the holidays. Today, the drink has nearly vanished, remembered only by those who tasted its warming comfort. Golden squash pie was the mid-century alternative to pumpkin pie when winter squash was cheaper, easier to store, or more available. Betty Crocker offered versions that used mashed squash blended with spices, milk, and eggs to create a smooth custard filling glowing a deeper gold than traditional pumpkin. The pie baked into a warm, sweet, earthy dessert that tasted familiar yet slightly richer. Families made it when budgets were tight or when gardens produced more squash than anything else, making it a practical but delicious holiday choice. The filling held a natural sweetness that felt comforting after long, cold weeks, and the color brought brightness to winter tables. Slices disappeared quickly because the flavor surprised people every time, reminding them that simple ingredients could still feel festive. Tom and Jerry batter drink was the toast of every mid-century Christmas gathering, a warm and frothy cocktail that carried the hum of laughter and the glow of holiday lights. It was not just a drink, it was a ritual. Families gathered around punch bowls, the air heavy with the scent of nutmeg and rum, while someone carefully folded beaten egg whites into yolks and sugar. The result was a velvety batter spooned into mugs and topped with hot milk or brandy, frothing like a winter cloud. It was sweet, heavy, and meant to be sipped slowly while the record player hummed in the background. The Tom and Jerry was not for the faint-hearted. It took patience to make and could curdle with a careless stir. But those who mastered it had bragging rights, and each cup felt like liquid nostalgia. It was America's own festive elixir, a recipe that brought warmth to cold rooms and turned gatherings into memories. Broccoli rice casserole became a 1970s Christmas staple when convenience products merged with home cooking to create something families genuinely craved. Cooks combined cooked rice with chopped broccoli, then folded in cream of mushroom soup and processed cheese spread that melted into golden richness. Some recipes called for sautéed onions and celery, adding layers of flavor beneath the creamy base. The mixture was baked until bubbling around the edges, the top developing golden spots where cheese had caramelized. The texture was comfort itself, creamy rice studded with tender broccoli, every bite coated in savory cheese sauce. Children who refused plain broccoli would eat it gladly when disguised in this casserole, making it a parental victory as much as a side dish. The recipe appeared in community cookbooks across America. Broccoli rice casserole represented an era when processed ingredients were celebrated, when feeding families well meant using every shortcut available. Christmas goose was once the centerpiece of holiday tables before turkey claimed that position, offering darker meat and richer flavor that many families preferred. Preparing a goose required skill few modern cooks possess. The bird's thick fat layer needed careful rendering to avoid greasiness while keeping meat moist. Cooks would prick the skin repeatedly, roast the goose on a rack to let fat drip away, and collect precious drippings for other uses throughout the year. The rendered goose fat was culinary gold, perfect for roasting potatoes or frying vegetables. Stuffings ranged from simple bread and onion to elaborate mixtures featuring apples, chestnuts, or prunes. The bird emerged from the oven with crispy mahogany skin and meat that tasted of the season itself. Families served goose with roasted root vegetables, red cabbage, and gravy made from drippings. The tradition connected American tables to European ancestors who had celebrated with goose for centuries. Seafood. Newburg was the luxurious first course that opened Christmas dinner with creamy richness and delicate shellfish. Lobster, shrimp, and sometimes crab meat were gently folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, and sherry, the mixture served over toast points or in patty shells. The sauce was velvety and rich, coating each piece of seafood in decadent luxury that justified its holiday placement. Making Newburg required careful technique. The egg yolks could curdle if the sauce got too hot, ruining everything. Families served this as a first course before the main roast, a statement of abundance and sophistication. The dish came from Delmonico's restaurant in New York, spreading to home kitchens where ambitious cooks recreated its elegance. Seafood Newburg represented the era's formal dining culture, when Christmas dinner was multiple courses served with ceremony. It has largely vanished, replaced by simpler appetizers that don't require last-minute sauce making. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Tomato aspic ring was a savory gelatin dish that once appeared in nearly every Betty Crocker holiday spread, even though today most people cannot imagine eating tomato juice suspended in a mold. Your grandparents knew it as a classic cold salad presented in bright red rings filled with crisp lettuce, celery, or cucumber in the center. It was elegant by mid-century standards, a way to show skill and modern taste when gelatin molds were considered the height of home entertaining. The mixture combined seasoned tomato liquid, gelatin, Worcestershire, and sometimes chopped vegetables, then chilled until firm enough to slice. The aspic was served alongside turkey ham or roast, making it a refreshing counterbalance to heavy foods. It looked dramatic on a table, especially when unmolded onto a polished platter shaped perfectly smooth and glistening under holiday lights. Time changed the expectations of Christmas menus, and with that change, tomato aspic faded quietly from homes replaced by fresher, lighter dishes. But for families who remember it, the aspic was a sign of tradition, care, and pride in presenting something beautiful even when ingredients were humble. It carried the spirit of a hostess who wanted her table to look as joyful as the season itself. Oyster dressing was the taste of coastal Christmas, a rich, savory stuffing made with bread, butter, onions, and the briny sweetness of oysters. It was a tradition that came from seaside families who celebrated the winter harvest of the ocean. The dish balanced elegance and earthiness, offering a flavor both luxurious and familiar. Cooks folded chopped oysters into seasoned bread cubes, baked it golden, and served it steaming beside roasted turkey or duck. The scent was unmistakable, a blend of the sea and the hearth, comfort and extravagance all at once. It was a dish that carried pride, the mark of homes close to the water where oysters were fresh and plentiful. In some families, it replaced turkey altogether, becoming the main attraction on the table. The salt and butter mingled in a way that made every bite taste like winter warmth meeting ocean air. In the South, especially along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts, no Christmas was complete without it. Though it has disappeared from many tables today, oyster dressing remains a quiet reminder of holiday abundance drawn straight from nature's hands. It was proof that luxury could come from what the tide brought in, and that the best feasts were those tied to the land and sea that sustained you. Pork backbone and dumplings was Christmas comfort food that transformed butchering remnants into soul-warming celebration. The backbone, cut from hogs during December slaughter, was meaty enough to flavor broth but cheap enough for everyday tables. The bones simmered for hours with onions and black pepper until meat fell away tender. Then dumplings were dropped into bubbling broth. Flour, lard, and buttermilk rolled thin and cut into strips. They puffed up while cooking, absorbing rich pork flavor and creating thickness. In rural communities throughout the South, backbone and dumplings meant Christmas thrift elevated to tradition. Families gathered around steaming pots, spooning dumplings and tender pork into bowls. This wasn't fancy food, but it was deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed you from inside while snow fell outside. The dumplings were tender and rich, the pork sweet and falling apart soft. This represented mountain Christmas, making celebration from what you had, turning necessity into tradition passed through generations. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Stollen was the German Christmas bread that arrived wrapped in powdered sugar like a gift from old-world bakeries, a rich yeasted loaf filled with dried fruits, nuts, and marzipan. The dough was enriched with butter, eggs, and milk until almost cake-like, then studded with candied citrus peel, raisins, and almonds before being shaped into an oblong loaf meant to represent the swaddled Christ child. A rope of marzipan ran through the center, adding sweetness and almond flavor. After baking, the warm loaf was brushed with melted butter and buried under powdered sugar. Stollen improved with age, flavors melding over weeks as the bread sat wrapped in foil. German immigrant families brought Stollen traditions to America, where the bread became a Christmas morning staple in Midwest communities. Bakeries once sold Stollen by the pound during December. The bread connected families to ancestors across the ocean and centuries of tradition. Wassail punch was the warm, spiced beverage that welcomed Christmas guests with its cinnamon-scented steam and fruity sweetness. Apple cider was heated with orange juice, brown sugar, cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, and allspice berries until the house filled with holiday fragrance. Some versions included ale or sherry for adults, while family-friendly batches kept it simple. The punch was served from large bowls, guests ladling cups of the warm liquid and cupping them for warmth. Baked apples sometimes floated in the punch, softening as they absorbed the spiced cider. Wassail connected American Christmas to centuries of English tradition. The name derived from old toasting customs. Families served it at open houses and caroling parties where cold guests needed warming. The punch represented hospitality itself, offered to everyone who entered. Wassail has largely faded from holiday gatherings, replaced by coffee and wine that lack its festive, spiced character. Stuffed cabbage rolls stretched small amounts of meat into Christmas meals that could feed entire families, each leaf wrapped around filling that made a little go a long way. Ground pork or beef mixed with rice, onions, and seasonings created filling that was parceled carefully into blanched cabbage leaves, each roll containing just enough meat to provide flavor without excess. The rolls were packed into pots, covered with tomato sauce or broth, then simmered until the cabbage became tender and the filling cooked through. 1 pound of meat could produce a dozen rolls, enough to fill every plate at the table. Families of Eastern European heritage brought the tradition to America, where it became poor man's Christmas dinner for immigrant communities. The rolls were served with the cooking liquid spooned over, each bite delivering cabbage sweetness and savory meat filling. Stuffed cabbage represented the immigrant wisdom of making resources stretch through clever preparation. Popcorn balls were the Christmas treats that appeared at holiday parties and hung from trees as edible decorations, spheres of popped corn held together with molasses or sugar syrup. The process required freshly popped corn, no kernels, no old maids, mixed quickly with hot syrup before the mixture cooled and became unworkable. Cooks buttered their hands and shaped the sticky mass into balls, while heat made their palms tingle. Some recipes used molasses for dark, chewy popcorn balls. Others used clear sugar syrup for lighter versions that sparkled. Red food coloring made festive Christmas balls, while green created holiday trees when molded into cone shapes. The treats were wrapped in cellophane and tied with ribbons for gifting or display. Children helped make popcorn balls, learning to work quickly and tolerate sticky fingers. The tradition connected Christmas to harvest abundance, corn being the American grain. Though commercial versions exist today, homemade popcorn balls carried the warmth of kitchens and hands that shaped them. Sweet and sour red cabbage brought German heritage to American Christmas tables, its purple-red color adding drama to plates dominated by browns. Shredded cabbage was braised slowly with apples, onions, vinegar, sugar, and warming spices until tender and deeply flavored. The long cooking allowed sweet-sour balance to develop fully. Cloves and bay leaves added complexity, while apple pieces contributed natural sweetness. This dish was traditionally served alongside roast goose or pork, its acidity cutting through rich meats perfectly. The cabbage could be made days ahead and reheated, improving as flavors melded. Children often surprised themselves by enjoying it, the sweetness making the unfamiliar vegetable approachable. Sweet and sour red cabbage represented immigrant traditions that enriched American holiday tables, proving the best dishes traveled across oceans. Dried apple stack pie was Christmas dessert requiring year-round work and patient assembly. Unlike stack cake with filling between layers, this pie layered thin pastry with reconstituted dried apples, building height through repetition. Each layer was seasoned with cinnamon and sugar before the next went on. Baked slowly, the pie emerged golden with visible apple layers throughout. In Appalachian communities, dried apple stack pie represented Christmas tradition connecting summer work to winter celebration. The apples had to be dried in August, stored properly through fall, then carefully rehydrated for Christmas baking. The result was concentrated apple flavor in every bite, proof that patience created the best results. This was mountain Christmas at its finest, taking what summer provided, preserving it through fall, and transforming it into winter celebration that tasted like all 3 seasons, combined into one magnificent pie feeding dozens and creating memories lasting lifetimes. Raisin Spice Drop cookies were the soft, warmly spiced holiday treats found in early Betty Crocker books, the kind baked by the dozens for school events, church gatherings, and family tins. Made from butter sugar flour, raisins, and warm spices, these cookies puffed gently as they baked, creating soft, pillowy centers that tasted like cinnamon-filled winter air. Their scent filled the kitchen and drifted down hallways, making the whole house smell like Christmas. Families baked large batches to share with neighbors and friends, continuing the old tradition of gifting homemade sweets during the holiday season. Though modern cookie trends have grown more elaborate, there is something enduring about these humble raisin-studded drops that speaks to a simpler time. Each batch felt like an act of care, and every warm cookie handed out felt like a small holiday kindness offered from one home to another. Cranberry orange mold shimmered on 1960s Christmas tables like edible stained glass. Bright and tart, it offered a rare burst of color during gray winter days. Housewives poured gelatin over crushed cranberries, orange zest, and bits of celery, sometimes adding nuts for a little crunch. The finished mold was firm, glossy, and ready to slide neatly onto a serving platter, glinting like a ruby centerpiece. Cranberry orange mold was elegance for the everyday cook, a dish that looked expensive but came from a few cans and a bit of patience. It carried the pride of homemaking, the belief that presentation mattered as much as flavor. Families sliced it alongside turkey and ham, its tang balancing the richness of the meal. It was festive, cheerful, and strangely comforting, a recipe that sparkled in the middle of an ordinary dining room. But somewhere along the way, it disappeared. Maybe too bright, too jiggly, too dated for modern taste. Still, for those who grew up watching it wobble in the fridge, the sight alone can take them straight back to Christmas Eve. Poinsettia Punch was the bright red cranberry-based drink mixed into glass bowls for Christmas parties in mid-century Betty Crocker, entertaining guides. The punch blended cranberry juice, citrus, and ginger ale, poured over ice rings frozen with cherries or mint leaves to look festive. It added sparkle color and sweetness to gatherings and was considered essential for hosts who wanted a cheerful drink that appealed to both children and adults. The punch bowl became a centerpiece, and guests gathered around dipping ladles into the shimmering red liquid. It was more than a drink, it was an atmosphere setter. It set the tone for an evening where laughter felt lighter and conversations flowed easily, reminding everyone that holiday cheer could begin with the simplest shared sip. Fried rabbit sausage with buttermilk biscuits was Christmas breakfast that turned wild game into something special enough for holiday morning. Mountain families ground rabbit meat with pork fat, sage, black pepper, and salt, forming patties that fried crispy in cast iron. The sausage was lean from rabbit but rich from pork fat, creating perfect balance. Served alongside buttermilk biscuits, split and buttered, this was breakfast that required hunting skill and butchering knowledge. In Appalachian communities, Christmas morning meant rabbit sausage sizzling while biscuits baked, filling houses with savory smells. Children woke to this aroma, understanding Christmas began with food earned through work. The sausage was tender inside with crackling crust outside, its sage flavor marking it as celebration food. This represented mountain Christmas, wild game transformed into tradition, poverty turned into pride through skill and resourcefulness. Creamed pearl onions were a labor of love that few modern cooks would undertake, requiring patience to peel dozens of tiny onions before drowning them in velvety white sauce. Cooks blanched the pearl onions briefly, then slipped off papery skins one by one, a task often assigned to older children as their holiday contribution. The peeled onions were simmered in milk until tender, then folded into rich bechamel sauce seasoned with nutmeg and white pepper. The finished dish was creamy and mild, the sweetness of cooked onions mellowing into something almost buttery. Served in china bowls alongside the roast, creamed pearl onions added elegance to tables where everyday meals were simpler. Some families topped theirs with breadcrumbs and broiled them golden, adding textural contrast to the silky interior. The dish spoke of abundance and effort, qualities that defined holiday entertaining in an era when convenience foods were beginning to dominate. Today, the ritual of peeling has disappeared, along with the dish itself. Boiled custard was the Christmas drink that arrived in punch bowls and crystal cups, a silky smooth beverage that warmed both hands and hearts during the holiday season. Unlike store-bought eggnog, this custard was cooked slowly on the stovetop, with patient cooks stirring constantly to prevent curdling while eggs, sugar, and whole milk transformed into something velvety. The process required attention. Too much heat and the eggs would scramble, Too little, and the custard stayed thin. Grandmothers knew exactly when to remove the pot from the heat, that moment when the mixture coated a wooden spoon and held its shape. Vanilla and nutmeg were added at the end, filling kitchens with the scent of the season. The custard was served cold in small cups, sometimes with bourbon for adults. Children waited eagerly for their share, knowing boiled custard meant Christmas had truly arrived. Families made gallons, sharing with neighbors and bringing it to church gatherings where it disappeared within minutes. Squirrel stew bubbled on Christmas stovetops in Appalachian homes where hunting provided what wages couldn't. The small game animals transformed into rich, satisfying meals through patience and skill. Hunters brought home squirrels by the dozen throughout autumn, and the fattest ones were saved for holiday cooking. The animals were cleaned and jointed, then browned in bacon drippings before being covered with water and simmered for hours with potatoes, onions, and wild herbs gathered from nearby woods. The meat became tender and flavorful, its slightly gamey taste mellowed by long cooking and balanced by vegetables. Families gathered around large pots, ladling stew into bowls and using cornbread to soak up the rich gravy. Children grew up considering squirrel stew a holiday treat, never knowing that wealthier families might have looked down on such fare. The dish represented mountain self-reliance, the ability to provide Christmas dinner through skill with a rifle rather than money at the store. Standing rib roast was the king of Christmas meats, its impressive size and rich marbling commanding respect from the moment it emerged from the oven. Butchers prepared these roasts with the bones still attached, creating a natural rack that elevated the meat for even cooking. The exterior was rubbed with garlic, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs, then roasted at high heat to create a deeply browned crust before the temperature dropped for slow cooking. Slicing revealed a gradient from well-done edges to rosy pink centers, allowing guests to choose their preferred doneness. The bones were fought over, gnawed clean at the table, or saved for soup. Yorkshire pudding was the traditional accompaniment, the batter puffing dramatically in the hot beef drippings. This was investment cooking, the roast costing more than a week's grocery budget, but justified by the holiday's importance. Standing rib roast represented prosperity and tradition, connecting American families to English Christmas customs. Date nut bread was once the quiet soul of Christmas baking, rich and dark with the scent of coffee and spice. It was baked in small loaf pans, wrapped in wax paper and tied with ribbon before being shared with neighbors and friends. Each slice told a story of thrift and love, sweetened with chopped dates and crunchy walnuts. The Depression-era kitchen was full of such recipes, born not from abundance, but from imagination. Dates added sweetness when sugar was scarce, and nuts stretched the batter further without waste. Served warm with butter or cream cheese, it was both humble and indulgent. Date nut bread was a gift you baked, not bought, and in that act of giving, it became something sacred. Today, it is mostly forgotten, lost among flashier desserts and faster lives. But if you ever taste it again, the deep caramel flavor, the softness, the quiet comfort, you will remember that some of the richest things come from the simplest hands. Green Christmas wreath salad was a lime gelatin mold shaped into a wreath and decorated with bright red cherries, giving tables a burst of holiday color. Betty Crocker popularized this dish for mid-century hostesses who wanted something festive, easy, and visually striking. The mixture combined lime gelatin, crushed pineapple cream cheese, or whipped topping depending on the household, and was chilled in a ring mold until firm. Once unmolded, it resembled a shiny green wreath, often set on lettuce leaves and dotted with cherries meant to mimic berries. It brought playful cheer to holiday spreads and was especially beloved by children who enjoyed its sweet, tart flavor. Over time, tastes shifted and colorful. Gelatin dishes disappeared from modern menus, but this wreath salad remains an unforgettable symbol of retro holiday charm. Marinated mushrooms were the tangy appetizer that disappeared first from relish trays, their garlicky brine making them irresistible to adults. Button mushrooms were simmered briefly in olive oil, vinegar, garlic, and herbs until they absorbed the marinade completely. Chilled overnight, they emerged firm yet tender, earthy flavor enhanced by bright acidity. Served cold alongside olives and pickles, marinated mushrooms added sophistication to appetizer spreads. The mushrooms could be jarred and stored for weeks, improving in the flavorful liquid. Some cooks added red pepper flakes for heat, while others kept it simple with garlic and Italian herbs. The dish required minimal cooking but delivered impressive results, perfect for busy schedules. Marinated mushrooms represented growing appreciation for Mediterranean flavors, bringing garlic and olive oil to tables that had previously known only butter. Mock turkey was the centerpiece of Christmas tables where real birds were impossible luxuries. A loaf of seasoned bread and vegetables shaped and roasted to resemble the turkey families couldn't afford. The preparation began days ahead. Stale bread saved and crumbled, mixed with sautéed onions, celery, sage, and whatever drippings could be scraped from previous meals. The mixture was packed into a mound, shaped to suggest a bird's body, sometimes with carved extensions mimicking drumsticks. Basted with butter or bacon grease, the loaf roasted until golden brown, its surface crackling and aromatic. Served on the best platter with gravy pooled around its base, mock turkey allowed families to participate in the ritual of carving at the table. Children who never knew the difference grew up believing this was how Christmas dinner looked. The dish represented dignity despite poverty, the determination to celebrate properly even when circumstances demanded creativity. Beef Wellington was the ultimate expression of holiday extravagance, wrapping prime beef tenderloin in mushroom duxelles and flaky puff pastry. The preparation took hours, searing the beef, cooking down finely chopped mushrooms until they were practically dry, wrapping everything in pastry and chilling until firm. Timing the bake was crucial. The pastry needed to turn golden while the beef inside stayed perfectly pink. Slicing revealed beautiful cross-sections of meat encased in mushroom and pastry that made guests audibly gasp. This was company food, reserved for Christmas Eve dinners when important guests were coming or when families wanted to prove their sophistication. The dish required expensive ingredients and considerable skill, making it a status symbol as much as a meal. Beef Wellington represented the aspirational cooking of the era, when home cooks attempted restaurant-quality dishes to impress. It has largely vanished from home kitchens, relegated to expensive steakhouses where few experience its former glory. Marzipan fruits were the Christmas confections that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Miniature apples, pears, oranges, and strawberries molded from almond paste and painted with food coloring until they resembled the real thing in stunning detail. Making them required grinding blanched almonds with sugar into smooth paste, then shaping small pieces by hand into fruit forms that captured each variety's distinctive shape. Fine brushes applied layers of color, building up realistic blushes and shading that made each piece unique. Tiny clove stems and leaf shapes cut from green marzipan completed the illusion. The finished fruits were displayed on silver trays or packed in gift boxes lined with tissue paper, treasured for their beauty as much as their sweet almond taste. Creating marzipan fruits took hours of patient work, the kind of handcraft that showed recipients they were truly valued. European confectionery traditions brought this art to American shores. Congealed cranberry salad was the jewel-toned centerpiece of holiday tables, a shimmering mold that turned canned cranberries into something worthy of celebration. Homemakers dissolved cherry gelatin in boiling water, then folded in whole cranberry sauce with chopped celery, walnuts, and crushed pineapple for texture. The mixture was poured into decorative ring molds, then chilled overnight until firm enough to unmold onto crisp lettuce leaves. The result was stunning. Deep ruby red with visible chunks of fruit and nuts suspended throughout like edible stained glass. Children watched in amazement as the wobbly creation held its shape on serving platters. The tartness of cranberries balanced the sweetness of gelatin, while celery provided unexpected crunch. This dish required planning and patience, qualities that defined holiday cooking before instant everything arrived. Today, it has largely vanished from Christmas spreads, replaced by simpler preparations that lack the artistry of waiting for that perfect gelatin set. Mock pecan pie was proof that resourcefulness can taste like luxury. When pecans were too expensive or impossible to find, clever home bakers turned to oatmeal or crushed crackers for the filling. They mixed it with syrup, sugar, and butter to recreate the texture and sweetness of the real thing, and somehow, it worked. The pie came out golden, gooey, and rich enough to make anyone forget it was an imitation. During hard times, mock recipes like this kept the spirit of celebration alive when ingredients were rationed or simply gone. Families gathered around the same table, cutting into something made from almost nothing, and no one complained. It was less about what went into the pie than about what it represented: hope, cleverness, and a touch of defiance. Today, few remember the recipe, but its lesson remains timeless. Sometimes the best desserts are born from making do. Every flaky crust held a story of survival that tasted like sweetness itself. Souse meat with crackers was Christmas appetizer that transformed pork scraps into delicacy through careful preparation. The souse was made from pig heads, feet, and ears boiled until tender, then chopped fine and bound with gelatin from bones. Vinegar, onions, and spices were added before pressing mixture into loaf pans to set. By Christmas, the souse sliced clean, its texture firm and slightly gelatinous, its flavor tangy and rich. Served cold with saltine crackers, this was Christmas snacking that represented complete hog utilization. In mountain communities, souse meant respect for animals and refusal to waste anything. The vinegar preserved meat while adding brightness that cut through richness. Children learned to appreciate souse as grown-up food, its complex flavors marking passage into adult tastes. This was Christmas tradition born from necessity, proving that the finest cooking often came from using everything and wasting nothing. Chestnut soup with bacon was Christmas' first course that captured forest bounty and smokehouse richness. Wild chestnuts gathered in fall were roasted, peeled, and simmered until soft enough to puree. The resulting soup was thickened with cream when available, or milk when not, creating velvety texture. Crispy bacon crumbled on top added saltiness and crunch that complemented chestnut sweetness. In Appalachian communities, chestnut soup represented Christmas before the blight destroyed American chestnuts, marking this as truly forgotten food. The soup was elegant despite humble ingredients, its nutty sweetness unlike anything modern. Served hot in bowls, it warmed bodies preparing for larger Christmas meal to follow. The bacon provided savory contrast while adding necessary fat. This was mountain sophistication, wild food prepared with technique that created restaurant-quality results, proving rural cooks understood refinement even when cooking from forest and farm. Which 1970s Christmas dinner will you bring back this year? Share your favorite holiday memories in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the most delicious decade in American cooking.